Good evening, folks. We're going to call tonight's Development Review Board meeting to order. All board members are present. One small change to the agenda. Item 7 will be coming in place of item 6, and 6 will be following 7. It's the 2 Jewel Brook properties. That's the typo in the agenda. First, we're going to be opening a recessed public hearing for Shaw's Supermarket. If you were previously sworn in, you are still sworn into this hearing. Is there anyone new here this evening that has not been previously sworn in and needs to be sworn in to discuss at this hearing? Okay. Let's have an update from the Shaw's representative.
Good evening. My name is Nicholas Nitschke. I'm with Scott Griffin Architects. I'm the architect for the Shaw's remodel as well as the floodproofing initiative. So what was submitted to you for today's meeting was an update to the previous set after being reviewed by Mr. Meadash, the floodplains manager. He identified portions of the previous design where we had a freestanding flood wall that surrounded the sidewalk portion of the front of the building. A portion of one of the FEMA publications listed an independent flood wall as not qualifying as dry floodproofing solution for a building. So what we've done in the package that was submitted to you now, dated 6/3, was we've taken that flood wall and we've moved it into be in line with the building wall itself. As a result, we're removing the brick veneer from the face of the building to make room to be able to construct the concrete flood wall on top of the existing concrete foundation wall. They get pinned together. The new flood wall extends down to the top of the footing, and that creates the monolithic flood wall, not just attached to the face of the building, but in line with the structure itself to make it integral to the building, and thereby, and as agreed to by Mr. Meadash, meets the criteria of that FEMA regulation. So that document that you have has been updated in regards to the construction details, the drawings, as well as the narrative and the flood emergency plan that gets stored on site to instruct the folks responsible for implementing it as to the current design. And that's our final, most recent, design solution for your consideration.
First question, so on the openings that are not going to have that, is it going to use a similar design to the closures that was previously presented for like the doors and stuff? Okay.
Correct.
So that portion of that design has stayed the same?
Correct. The only adjustment is instead of sliding doors at every opening, we're using more swinging doors, which are just as reliable. They're flood doors. They're just a little bit less complex in their implementation, so I think you're even more reliable.
Okay. And what about the roll-up doors? Are all of them going to be swing type, or are there still going to be some of the?
So the main entrance to the Shaw's space will still be a sliding door.
Okay.
The other entrances will be protected by swinging doors.
Okay.
And the roll-up doors at the back of the building and the bank drive-up window, those things that were previously planks that get slid into a track, that remains the same as before.
Any questions from the board members?
Yeah, on the entrance door, the sliding door. So if all of a sudden, like we had in July, at a certain point we all realized we have a problem here, what happens when the staff working at 2 o'clock in the afternoon says, I think we have a problem here? Mm-hmm. What would their actions be? What would this door's function be?
Sure.
Would it keep water out? Would it keep customers in? What's that?
Sure. So there's a whole procedure outlined in the document, but basically once that decision is made to close the store and implement the floodproofing measures, the store is closed. All the employees who aren't involved in the floodproofing can go. All the customers have to leave the building. The other tenants, they would need to close. The bank and the realtor and the other lawyer's office, they need to close so that there aren't public in the building. And then from that point, the employees would begin installing the necessary floodproofing portions. So if they start at the back of the building, they would install the flood planks at the loading dock doors, and those would become secure. And then when they got to the front of the building, the sliding gate that's in front of the auto doors that go into the Shaws, there's a track in the ground that makes it flush when there's carriages going over it, but when it's time to slide the door shut, that swings up, and then the door swings into place to cover the opening. It gets kind of ratcheted into place so it tightens against the sill and against the jambs of the opening, and then that becomes completely impermeable to water up to that 4 feet elevation. And then they would continue across the front of the building, and they would close the other openings that are protected by the swinging gate. And those would lock into place. And then finally, the flood planks on the right-hand side of the building where the bank is, those would be put into place, and then the building would be fully secured with no one inside. And then everyone would leave the property so that they're not in the, the general flood area that's in danger. And that's how the property would be left.
How long do you think the deployment would take? As just an estimate?
Yeah, I estimated for 2 people, maximum 90 minutes. And the more people, the more hands on deck you had, the less time that would take. But the idea was to make it as quick as possible.
So in the previous design, you'd showed that the planks and stuff were going to be stored next to those. Is that still the plan?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions from the board on the new design?
Not on the design.
Okay.
Do you have an opening date?
An opening date for the store? Yeah, it's still the end of this month as they've been working towards.
So one thing that was in a group of the emails that we have as part of the file was that your fire testing is going to be held after this hearing. What was that date, Jared? 13th. The 13th, is that correct?
Correct.
When do you expect that report for them to provide that to you?
I'm not sure their turnaround time on that. I imagine it's pretty quick after they do it,
Okay.
but I can't say for sure.
Okay. So just to touch a little bit on one of the letters here from Kyle in the email, one of the requirements that you will be required to submit will be your dry floodproofing certificate.
Correct.
Okay. Just to kind of go through the list of things, I know you have a tentative date set forth, and so a lot of things have to come potentially line up to make that happen. We are going to need the elevation certificate and have that fire report in hand.
Yep.
And then for, obviously, a decision would be issued by this board, and then a CO inspection, a verification of all those things, of which one of those would be that dry floodproofing certificate. And outlined here, and I'll read this just so it's officially on the record, that, get my quoted here. That Kyle references that with that dry floodproofing certificate, that would protect both the town and yourself from an NFIP, basically a ding from FEMA.
Correct.
Because we have not heard from them.
Correct.
And I just want to make sure that, obviously, these are emails all CC'd, but just want to make sure that's on the record.
Correct.
As acknowledgement. He also does touch on the fuel tanks in the back. As you probably saw in his, this project does not encompass those, but those meet everything, being that they're pre-existing and were unaffected in the flood. But if there was going to ever be a change, that he would add those requirements to bring them up. You're okay with those?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to clarify, though, about the CO for the building. and the timing of that FEMA certificate. So the FEMA certificate completion happens quite a bit after, well, it's after the completion of all the floodproofing improvements are done, so that they can certify that the heights of the floodproofing meet the design. So that, I think he says in his email, he recommended kind of a stipulation that that certificate would be provided within a certain amount of time after the approval, so that there's time to both do the floodproofing work and get it certified, which is what's required for the completion of that FEMA document.
And that's, you guys do the certification, filling out that form?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Is all the floodproofing work going to be complete before your opening, pending tonight?
No.
Okay. How long do you think that's going to be?
I was expecting anywhere from 90 to 120 days after the approval, which would allow us to go with that design, that approved design.
Okay.
Given that some of these products that are going to be used have lead times and things like that, there's a good chance that it'll be done sooner, but, you know, the goal of everyone is to get it done as quickly as possible, but I know some of the limitations.
Any questions from the board?
How does this affect the other tenants of the building, such as the real estate office, the bank, and the other commercial unit?
Sure. So their spaces will require some work to their entrance doors, some of their windows. Obviously, they'll be affected by the work being done to the facade to take the brick off. So the intent is for that work to be staged in such a way that they maintain their business as usual, they maintain their accessibility to the customers, and that work is done in such a way that it's behind barriers or it's in a protected way so that their businesses aren't affected to the greatest extent possible while we're doing that work within their spaces, and we'll work closely with them to make sure that that gets done.
Is there a plan in place specifically for the bank? Because being it is a financial institution, it really can't remain open for, you know, longer than a day at a time, I guess, so, you know, without raising security concerns.
Sure.
So I don't know if you have anything in place to handle their particular instance.
Yeah, usually what I've known to happen is, you know, any work that needs to be done, we would use, you know, a representative from the bank as someone on site to make sure that, you know, the work being done was, you know, kept within the area where the work was being done, and there wasn't any fear of, you know, any safety concerns or security concerns within the bank. So that's how we'll work directly with them to make sure that they have personnel and the contractor has the proper checks and balances in place to make sure that it's kept secure and safe for everybody.
I understand that you have been in contact with some of the members of the bank.
Yes.
And gone over some of these plans and details with them?
Yes.
Rose, do you have any input?
I don't at this time, so I'm a little concerned about the time frame and the CO, and we can discuss maybe temporary CO to get them opened, and then hopefully within the 3 months that everything would be completed and he would have everything that he needed to give us for the final CO.
Questions from the board? Is there anyone who is sworn in that wishes to ask questions, comments, either from Zoom or from the crowd? Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the matter now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? And you're going to have to come up to the mic, Andrea, and say your name.
I just wondered if there was going to be, I apologize if I missed the question. Will there be a pharmacy, and which one? Thank you.
Yep, there is a pharmacy in the new store. As far as which one, I'm not 100% sure which pharmacy they're working with directly, but there is one, brand new one in the store.
What's the board's purview, knowing that we're going to have the fire report that we'll need for the decision? What did you say, Jared? The 13th is when that was going to be issued. I think we could close sometime after that to receive that report, but what's the board's thoughts?
I'd make a motion to, is there anything else pending time-wise, other than we know FEMA's way out there and so on?
We don't need, so that's where the dry flood proofing certificate comes in. Once it's certified, that protects us from an NFIP ding. That's what Rose was talking about in reference to the conditional CO, that you'd be conditioned based off of that being approved. Is that something that you're okay with?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what's the board think?
Yeah, totally fine.
Okay. What do you think's a fair timeline for you to try to get us that fire report?
Given that the test date is on the 13th, I would expect it to be ready, so that's the end of this week. I would think before the end of next week, they would be able to have that available.
So what's that first? That would be, what, 21st is a what?
21st next Friday.
Okay.
What's that, June 22nd?
21st is the Friday. So you think that's acceptable to get us there by then?
I would think at the latest.
Okay. I make a motion that we will close the Shaw's hearing on June 21st.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
You want to put a time in there, at the end of business on 21st?
Sure. Yeah. I'll make a amendment to that at end of business on the 21st. Any discussion from anyone in the crowd? On Zoom, Jared, anything? No hands are up. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate you coming in person. Next, we're going to open a new public hearing for Brookhaven Homeowners Association. Go ahead, Jared.
This is application 361-12-FHR, amendment number 1. Brookhaven Homeowners Association is the applicant, property owner is the same. The application is to replace pool fencing and patio surface damaged by the Great Flood of 2023. This project is in the Town Residential Commercial 1 District. Hearing date is today, June 10th, 2024, 6 p.m. Public postings were at the town clerk's office, town hall bulletin boards, and post office on May 15th, 2024, and on the town website on May 24th, 2024, as well as the newspaper of record, the Vermont Journal, on May 22nd, 2024, and the abutting property owners were notified on May 24th, 2024.
Thanks, Jared. For those who are here to speak to this hearing and this hearing alone, you will have to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the matter now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Okay. How about you tell us about your project?
Thank you. My name is Jim Leahy. I'm the president of the Brookhaven Owners Association. And as you see before you, the plan is to try to replace what was damaged by the flood with materials that are both suitable for a flood zone, but also could withstand future floods. The deck that was ripped away is somewhere in Springfield, I think, right now. So the plan would be to take instead of going back with the composite decking, to look at a permeable paver solution. I brought with me Jim Gorman from Creative Exteriors, which is a landscape company that has a lot of experience doing this kind of work, including the sub-base to promote drainage. And then instead of replacing the chain link fence, which acts as a net in a flood, using a more traditional aluminum ornamental fence, which allows larger items and more items to pass through. The pool actually survived. There's not much work that has to go into the pool, which is stunning, having seen some of the video footage. But we're also using the opportunity to redo all the electrical so that it meets public pool standards and grounds, and using the Chester electrician who did their pool renovation recently. I also added tonight, we didn't have the specs for the fence. I added that into the packet tonight. Jim, do you want to come up and talk about he can talk about the paver solution.
Thank you.
So we're the contractor of record. My name is Jim Gorman. My business is Creative Exteriors. What we're hoping to do is, and what we're proposing to do, is do a permeable paver using the same footprint that was originally designed and installed as a composite deck. It's roughly between 1,000 and 1,100 square feet. We're hoping to put in 12 inches of base material, including the paver. These pavers are a larger, what we call XL paver. To make them permeable, what we do is use 10 inches of crushed stone on top of a filter fabric over the existing soils. So we excavate down about 13 inches or so. We lay our filter fabric, and then we compact in layers, 3/4 inch clean gravel, washed gravel, for the 1,000 square feet. It's screeded and tamped over and over again. And then the pavers that we're proposing are a permeable paver that's 3 sizes, 75 pounds, 50 pounds, and 25 pounds. We interlock them with the tabs, and then we sweep it when it's all finished. We compact the pavers, and then we sweep with what we call 1/8 inch minus grit to allow water to penetrate and infiltrate into the existing gravel around the pool. And then we use what they call a gator restraint, which is a mortar-like substance on a 45-degree angle, troweled along the whole exterior of the pavers. We've had a lot of luck in floodplains in Connecticut, along lakes and oceanfront properties. I really do believe that 42 years of experience, I think we can make this work. If you look at the site now, one of the remaining, after the pool got damaged, the fence got washed away, even the existing pavers there now that go from the upper parking lot down to the pool is a similar system, just much smaller. We're proposing a much larger system, but those are just 4x8 pavers. And I couldn't find a loose paver, after the flood. And we all know that pool was buried by 4 feet of water. So the system we're proposing, quite honestly, I believe is the structural integrity is even that much more than what's existing and survived the flood. So.
Questions from the board on this project?
Just for the record, exactly what is a permeable paver? What's it made of?
Permeable pavers are come in a range of sizes. They're usually on the thicker side of a paver, can be anywhere from 2 3/8 up to 3 1/4 inches. These are about the 2 companies that we would like to work with is Cambridge and Technoblock, and pretty close to the 3-inch thickness. So and there's tabs on these pavers. So the tabs keep these interlocked, but they also keep the spacing. So the spacing's about 3/8 of an inch. So you have 10 inches of crushed stone with filter fabric underneath on the existing soils. So 10 inches of filtration, and then the paver. The pavers are all, the seams are all exactly the same because of the tabs. And then they're all compacted into the gravel with a big vibrating compactor, and then swept with an 1/8 inch mine-ish, small, like pea stone, but smaller than pea stone, up to an 1/8 inch, and allows the water to penetrate through, gets into the filtration system, and slowly will dissipate into the existing soils. Yeah, the pavers are all concrete pavers.
So okay, I got it.
So it's the gap.
Yeah,
It's
it's the gap,
gap
yep.
with the clip, with the clips is
Yeah,
what you referred to it
The
as?
gaps are all symmetrical, they're all exactly the same.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Go ahead, Phil. Yeah, that's where I was gonna go. So you're probably familiar with the note from Kyle Midash, who covers the floodplain for your area. So just in reference to his requirements for your fence posts, ensure that they're and I'm reading verbatim from his letter, ensure that the concrete footings are buried deep enough to resist the downward scour forces of floodwater around the posts, prevent or overtopping. 4-inch vertically spaced fencing is certainly approved, which you did provide the design for, to allow the passage of water and debris. And in his second paragraph, he references the deck replacement with pavers as a no-fill, no increase in footprint. Any excavated materials must be hauled and disposed of outside of the floodway. Exported and imported material quantities should be confirmed in the permit.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to touch on that, Phil? No. Okay. Any questions, Jared, Rose? Anyone else that was sworn in the audience or on Zoom have questions?
What's the fence? Is it aluminum?
Anodized aluminum, powder coated, 54-inch height. I think the fence that was there before, I think, was 48 inches. So 54, we decided to go an extra 6 inches. And footings, concrete footings, what we saw out there was 12 to 14 inches. These would be minimum 32 to 36 inches, concrete footings for all the posts.
And we'll take the one question,
Yep.
gentleman behind you. You do have to step up to the podium, unfortunately, so the Zoom folks can hear you. And if you can just state your name for the record first.
My name is Jay Lushinks. I live on Pleasant Street Extension. After the flood, the property of Brookhaven along the river is full of debris. Some of it was pushed over when they started to move the debris from the fence. They pushed it down toward the river. My house sits directly across the river, and that debris is still there. It's been there since they started back a year ago. I'd just like to see that, along with being able to take out the pool pavers and replace everything, which they fully deserve to do, that they be required to clean up that flood mess that's along the river before more of it gets flowed in. If we get even high water, some more of that debris is going to flow into the river.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I agree with them, but I don't think it's on our property. It's next door.
If you can just talk into the mic, sorry.
There is a big pile of debris that is just over the property line from ours that we all look at that I would love to get rid of.
Okay.
But it's actually on I think it's a physical therapy office, which is adjacent to our property.
Okay.
It's right along the river. It can't be more than 10 feet over the property line,
Okay.
but I don't believe it's on our property.
Thanks. Questions from the board?
Who would be responsible for that? I know that Brett's done a lot of work, Brett River actually to replace
I know the town's done a lot of cleanup because they've cataloged the tonnage over at the Little League Field.
Basically, the person who put it there is responsible to clean it up, even if it's on somebody else's property.
Even if it was the water,
Oh, that's a little different story.
It looks like
If it was naturally
it
placed
was
there.
naturally put there? Okay,
because we get rid of all
okay.
all the debris that was in our woods, we got rid of.
Rose, do you know maybe any better?
I mean, we don't know whose debris it is, but, if you look at it, you might be able to know. So if it's whoever's property is on now should clean it up.
Okay,
So, that's unfortunate, but that's, that happens to everybody in the flood. They have to clean up their own properties.
okay. Anything else from the board? Okay. Any other questions from the crowd or on Zoom? Anything, Jared, hands up or anything? Okay. I make a motion that we close the Brookhaven hearing. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much for coming. Next, we're going to open a new public hearing for Michelle Suker and Vermont Bliss Catering. Go ahead, Jared.
This is application 22-485-CU Amendment Number 1. The applicant is Michelle Suker and Vermont Bliss Catering, LLC. Property owner is the same. The application is for outdoor seating. The hearing date is today, June 10th, 2024, time 6 p.m. Public postings were done at the town clerk's office, town hall bulletin boards, post office on May 15th, town website on May 24th, and in the Vermont Journal on May 22nd. Budding property owners were notified on May 24th, 24.
Thanks, Jared. All those who are here to speak to this hearing and this hearing alone, please raise your right hand and you have to be sworn in and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence that you shall give relative to the matter now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? I do. Okay, come on up and tell us about your project.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Suker. I'm the owner of the Eatery by Vermont Bliss. And before you, you have a proposal to use 2 of the 4 parking spots that I have in front of my building as a outdoor eating area. The idea came when we had a bunch of customers with animals last summer who wanted to come and enjoy our food. Obviously, we cannot welcome them in the restaurant, and that would allow our guests with their dogs on leashes to come sit and eat. Also, just lots of folks come in for takeout looking to go have a picnic, and it would be lovely to have them be able to be right outside our restaurant. I am looking to, as you can see in the pictures, add planters to define the space, as well as barriers around to make sure that all customers and cars know that that is a designated space for tables. I propose 4 6-foot picnic tables with umbrellas in that space. This is something that I've also talked over at length with Paula Hollander, my tenant next door. She has absolutely no concerns. I believe you have a letter from her as well. And I just would love to be able to take advantage of the nice summer days for our customers.
Thank you. Questions from the board members?
I just had a question concerning the police letter where he talks about did you get the police letter?
I did not see any of the letters, no.
Because number 3, he says, parking will be my concern. As with my original letter, parking is always a concern for business. Taking away 2 slots, although it seems minor, places a burden on where cars can park.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great.
These are the 3 letters from police fire.
I could see how that would be a concern in the winter, especially with all of the added guests to town. In the summer, between on-street parking and the walkability of town, I propose that there is enough parking available in town in the summer months. I was looking for Memorial Day through Columbus Day, and then return obviously back to the full 4 parking spots. And I would also like to point out that I'm very generous with my parking being available for my neighbors that are open evening hours. I have a camera, and I know that nightly my parking area is used by customers at Downtown Grocery. Not a problem, happy to share. I've talked with neighbors on the street. I believe you have letters from them, and they did not have concerns with losing those 2 parking spots, as far as I know. And also, I would like to think that you would recognize the impact that this will have on my very small business, being able to allow people to sit and eat. It will look vibrant, it will draw, having the umbrellas and the flowers and the eating area, it will draw the eyes of some of our visitors here in town, down Depot Street. I'd like to think that it will help them to discover all that we have to offer on Depot Street, not just my business. I think it just would add to the vibrancy of our summer community.
Other questions from the board members?
So let's talk about required spaces. I saw you just were doing some math.
Yep.
What'd you come up with?
297 square feet, based off the measurements we took at the site visit today.
So the
Of the interior space.
297, so that requires 2 spaces.
Yep.
And I would like to dispute that 45 of those square feet that were counted during that measurement are not space that could be used. The measurements were taken past the counter where I have seats, and that space is for the coffee station and for checking out at the register, and I don't feel that those 45 square feet could be used. I took pictures and have measurements. I can provide them to you after you left. I don't believe that they could be used for seating.
And you currently have 4 spaces out front?
There are 3 that are for me, for the eatery, and 1 for Hair by Paula.
And by our measurement, the 4 spaces exist?
That is correct. There are 4 spaces. The 4th space on the end is not marked well.
There's one line that is
Yeah,
faded,
there's a
yes.
line that's more or less disappeared. But based off the measurements, there are 4. There is room for, there are 4 spaces.
Right to the edge.
Yep. What's the board's feeling, being that this would be a summer only proposed?
From Memorial Day
From
to what?
Memorial Day to early October.
Yeah, Columbus Day. And obviously, that would be weather permitting. Some years that would be fabulous. Other years, we would take the furniture in.
Right, as of right now, where does the deliveries come? Is it on your property?
So the deliveries, I have a garage door at the back of the building. And so we have Cisco, Reinhardt, and Black River. Black River comes before anybody's open, sometimes just barely us. And all deliveries are just hand carted to the back of the building to the garage door.
Will they park between your place and the downtown?
They do. Deliveries take,
'Cause sometimes we
15
can't get out
minutes.
from back of the town hall.
okay. I had not heard that that was an issue, and I can, if you'd like, I know some delivery trucks for other businesses park further up Depot Street. I can, if that's an issue, we can talk about that. I was not aware. Usually it's about 15 minutes for deliveries.
Rose, Jared, do you guys have any stuff to add?
No, I think
There
it's a
is
good,
not.
proposal. There's other restaurants that are doing the same thing for the summer. And I think it's a good proposal.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Any other questions from anyone that was sworn in on Zoom or in the crowd? I make a motion that we close the hearing for Michelle Suker and Vermont Bliss Catering. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Is that 3 down and 6 to go?
Next, we're going to open a new public hearing for Greg Mariello and Janet Johnson. Go ahead, Jared.
This is application number 041-92-FHR, amendment number 2. Applicants are Gregory Moriello and Janet Johnson. Property owners are the same. Application is for the restoration, stabilization of a riverbank damaged by the Great Flood of 2023. Hearing date is today, June 10th, 2024, 6 p.m. Public postings were at the town clerk's office, town hall bulletin boards, post office on May 15th, 2024, town website on May 24th, 2024, and in the Vermont Journal on May 22nd, 2024. The abutting property owners were notified on May 24th, 2024.
Thank you very much, Jared. For those that wish to speak to this hearing and this hearing alone, you do have to be sworn in. Please raise your hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the matters now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? I do. Okay. Have you step up and tell us about your project.
I'm Greg Moriello. With me is my wife, Janet Johnson. And our proposal in front of the board tonight is asking permission to move a pile of stone that accumulated by virtue of the flood last July, about 100 yards below our house in the Branch Brook creek bed, and move it to a section just between our house and the creek that washed out. And that's it. It's about a 75-foot max section of brook bank that washed out. And the state of Vermont, both Kyle Medash, the floodplain manager, has approved our plan. He hasn't required crazy hydraulic studies and all that stuff. He's suggested to the board that you put not conditions on the operations, but that you look for pre and post construction photographs, and that we work with the state engineer to get a stream alteration permit. That's the floodplain manager's view. In his letter to the board and to me, he says this is essentially a de minimis project, no reason to suspect the project will have adverse effects on base flood heights or velocities or increased risk to surrounding properties. The reality is we're not adding materials to the creek bed. We're taking existing materials from point A and moving them, largely stone and gravel, to another section of the bank that's more critical to us because it's right behind our house, and it's also at the narrowest section of the brook. So it will, in high water situations, help us not have to see water come over the bank and mess up yards and things like that. It's not going to stop an Irene, or it's not going to stop a flood of the nature of last summer. But it will help us, and it will protect property that is almost certainly going to be impacted without this repair. State engineer Scott Jensen has approved the project, the mechanics of the project. He's looked at the stone. He's told us about limits, 50 cubic yards or something like that. I told him I'm a liberal arts guy. What does that mean in real life? He said about 5 trucks, and it's inconceivable that we would ever need that much stone for 75 feet of banking. But he was satisfied that taking stone from that point in the river, putting it into our bank would be acceptable, but the formality of the stream alteration permit, that's still pending. So our suggestion is that if there's approval for this project, that the board keep the application open for receipt of the stream alteration permit, and we go on from there.
Thank you very much. Just to state on the record, when we went there on the site visit, you depicted where this is a repair to an existing berm that was washed out.
Correct.
So it's not like we're creating a new berm, we're repairing your old berm.
Correct.
Okay, just to have that on the record. And I'll just read a couple lines here from their letters just to make sure they're on the record. It does fall within the FEMA regulatory floodway associated with the Branch Brook. But in this case, this is from Kyle Midash. I do not believe that a hydrologic and hydraulical analysis is necessary due to several factors, given that the proposal is restoring a plus or minus 75-foot section of bank to a pre-flood condition. You are not importing any new materials or channel encroachment are proposed. And the results of that, as you did state, would be a negligible, if not a zero, impact on a hydraulic analysis. The proposal does not add input fill to the site, aims to restore eroded bank to the pre-flood condition and contours using the native rock and material that was washed away. He did stipulate there the photo documentation and the stream alteration permit, which I do believe you have said you applied for, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any questions from the board on this project?
How are you going to move the rocks from one spot to the other?
Well, we've not formally engaged in an excavator, but it's not going to be me and my wheelbarrow. That's what it's been for 44 years. I'm done with that. It's going to be excavated, and they'll either come up on the ground, adjacent to between the house and the river, and just tote it. It's a pretty straight lateral line with the river.
Will the excavator go in the river itself?
Well, they'll have to get down into the riverbed to collect the stone.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah,
Just
go
want
ahead,
on
Phil.
record, George, that the letters are all in from the
Yep.
services.
We do have all
Doesn't
the
seem
letters.
any big impact.
Go ahead, Phil.
Did they give you any idea when the stream alteration permit might come your way?
No, and that's on me, because I've had conversations with the state engineer, Scott Jensen, since early May. Janet and I had him come out, look it over, and say, will this work? He said it'll work. I didn't realize that I needed the formality of a stream alteration permit. I thought once we had the floodplain manager okay it, which he has, we'd be good to go with Scott Jensen's authority. So it was my fault that I learned late they needed this permit. So it was just filed. So I'm hoping within a week or two, because it's, again, pretty simple.
Does Scott sign off on it?
I believe that he's the one. Yeah.
And he already saw he looked at the site.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Jared, Rose, do you guys have any inputs on this project?
No, I think it's good.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, just to be clear, from the site visit, the berm that eroded, that washed down the river, there's a bend in the river.
Yep.
That's what we're talking about. It sort of got all caught in that bend in the river is what it is.
Yep.
Basically, you're looking to clean that out and put it back where it was.
Yeah, we don't really care too much about, maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. We don't care about moving stone that's below our house for the sake of moving stone. We care about building up, rebuilding, restoring, fixing a bank adjacent to our house. And by our luck, it's fortunate that the river caused that collection area just 100 yards away from us, because we would not be allowed to bring new materials or new filling. That's one of the rules of the floodway. So there it is, and that's what explains it being a net neutral project.
So being that the potential timeline for the stream alteration permit is within a kind of a 2-week period, you've got a couple choices. The board would probably take a purview either way. We could close in 2 weeks and giving you the opportunity to get that data and submit it before the closure date. However, if it was not received, we'd kind of end up having to reopen your hearing anyways.
Okay.
Or we can recess the hearing till next month. And then when that permit comes in, we would look at that permit and close the hearing, I would surmise at that time.
Well, I think, tell me if you agree, your first option makes the most sense.
Okay.
Close as of 2 weeks, close the hearing in 2 weeks in anticipation of us being able to
24th. Okay.
supply that permit ahead of time. And if perchance it doesn't happen, then we'll,
Address that issue.
yeah,
Okay.
if that's all right.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from anyone else that was sworn in? Go ahead, Don.
I think that to go along with his problems up there, that the town ought to be looking at the whole brook system itself, because Nelson's property has a barrier that is not high enough to protect down our way anymore. It needs to be built up higher. Along the roadway above that is a section that is deteriorated to the point that it's going to take out the road there if something isn't being put in to fill that up, or riprap it or whatever. Above Mariola's house, it took out half the road up there. It hasn't been riprapped back again. The road is washing already, where the overflow from the ditches comes down and is washing right into the brook there. So it's taken all the gravel that's already been put back in place and it's running it off into the river. It needs to be riprap. The road needs to be taken care of a little better, and the brook needs to be cleaned out. There's enough huge boulders up there to riprap that whole section right there. They're just down in the river, but they need to be brought back and put along that side where it took out the brook and the road in the first place. And whatever, there's a lot of water come down there, but I mean, I've suffered water coming into my yard more than it ever has before, but that's because the beaver dams up in Mount Holly let go and it all came at once. So the whole system needs to be watched and it needs to be cleaned up a little bit. If it isn't going to get better, it's going to get worse. And the way things are coming nowadays, things are getting worse.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Gentlemen, yep. You do have to step up to the podium so that everyone can hear you.
My name is Brian Glenn. I live up on Godfrey Road, and I have 20 acres somewhere where you folks are talking about. I have never seen a map. I have no idea where on that stretch of river I abut 20 acres on the east side of the river. I'd be very interested in seeing what we're talking about. I don't think anybody's mentioned. I don't know where, and I don't know these folks.
So based off of what we saw at the site visit, they're going to be entering and exiting on the Moriello property. They don't.
And where is that? I have no clue, sir.
What's your address? 410. 410. Yeah.
Well, that's where I am. I have 20 acres there. I wouldn't want anybody to disrupt or take fill or anything else from my property.
The stones are going to be removed from the river, sir.
And go where?
They're going to be going along to rebuild the bank by Greg Moriello's property is the
Well,
proposed project.
He owns one side of it possibly, but I own the other side maybe, and I maybe wouldn't want the stone there. It's a gravel. It's a
Yeah,
huge-
we're going to let Greg respond to your comment, sir.
The file has info and address and
I
maps.
haven't seen it. I'd love to
I
see
mean,
it.
it's public record, but more importantly, our property is, you know where Rod and Gun Club Road is?
Absolutely.
You know that
I
bridge?
bought it, yeah.
Yeah. We own from there up on Buttermilk Falls,
Go-
on the
going-
riverside,
Going north?
on the riverside, and we own across Buttermilk Falls, 15 acres that goes from below Rod and Gun Club Road up to about an eighth of a mile up towards the top of the road. And we also own the property on the other side of the creek from Rod and Gun Club Road up beyond our house, which we're talking about here, and about 300 yards further north.
If I could just have a copy of the site plan. or
We can
something.
get you a copy.
That's it, yeah.
We'll have you give your info to Jared, and we'll make sure that you get a copy of the map.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions from the board? Any other questions from those that were sworn in, either in the crowd or on Zoom? Any hands or anything, Jared? Okay. And that date was, what did you say, 4th? Okay. I make a motion that we close the Greg Moriello and Janet Johnson hearing on June 24th.
I'll second.
Okay.
Whoever's first. We're fighting over here.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Come on, did you?
He said his last name, but I don't remember it. Yeah, okay, yeah. We'll look at the abutter list.
It's a very different area. No, I know.
Next, we're going to open a new public hearing for Jewel Brook LLC. This was number 7 on the list, and that reorder was noted at the beginning of the meeting. Go ahead, Jared.
All right, this is application sub 24-001, amendment number 1. The applicant is Larry Slayson of Salmon and Nostrin Law Offices representing Jewel Brook LLC. Property owner is Mr. Salvatore Maritoli. The project description is the final plat approval of a 4-lot subdivision located in the Village Residential Commercial District. Hearing date is today, June 10th, 2024, 6 p.m. Public postings were made known at the town clerk's office, town hall bulletin boards, post office on May 15th, and the town website on May 24th, and also in the Vermont Journal on May 22nd, 2024. The abutting property owners were notified on May 24th, 2024.
Thanks, Jared. So this hearing is just about the final plot approval for the subdivision, just as a clarification. For all those who wish to speak to this hearing and only this hearing, you do have to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the matter now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? I do. How about you tell us about your project?
I do.
Good evening. So the public hearing to review the sketch plan was held February 12, 2024. The DRB granted sketch plan approval on March 11. And in that sketch plan approval, it was requested that the applicant provide some additional materials. And the applicant provided a comprehensive package addressed to Rose Goings on March 26, 2024. We believe that all materials and documents have been filed, all fees have been paid, and I can answer more specific questions. Before I do so, I was remiss. I should also make it clear that the project owner, Sal Maritoli, I saw him a short time ago, was participating by Zoom. I believe he still is. And have the privilege tonight of working with Serenity Wolf. She's an engineer. The project engineer was Stevens and Associates. And again, I'm Larry Slayson with Salmon and Nostrin. So in the letter to Rose Goings on March 26, we included the updated letter from Chief Kalenda approving fire access. We provided additional materials showing that the program is enrolled in the BRELA, that's B-R-E-L-L-A, the Umbrella Environmental Remediation Program, and the action plan, the corrective action plan, they call it a CAP, has been approved. It's substantially the same as what was approved for prior projects, and I provided the letter that all known significant sources of contamination have been removed, and there's no objection to, at least on the from the state, on an environmental focus from moving forward. See if there's anything else. The applicant has paid in full the wastewater allocation. We provided the access permit applications and fees to Jared Jowdy by hand on February 12. We were informed that those have been improved, although I have yet to see them, but the access permits were submitted months ago. And so we'll take Mr. Jowdy's word that they've been approved by your highway foreman. There were no other ability to serve letters outstanding. The updated load analysis was submitted to Ludlow Electric. And bear with me as I look at your letter. I think we've addressed everything.
Okay. I think the only outstanding question I had on the final plat approval for the subdivision was access of Lot 1. If you can just tell us how that plan is.
Well, the lot one, well, all the lots, 1s, 2, 3, and 4, and maybe, Serenity, do you have the exhibit, the colored exhibit that shows them? I know that's our basic plat that you're approving, but to answer your question, here's the one I'm thinking of. Serenity, point out the 2 access points off the. Right, and that road is what, remind me again? Right, Parker Avenue. So it's a planned development, and so there's cross easements. All of the lots have access by the declaration that
Okay, so
creates
you're
the
using
project.
easements. That's really my question.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they're what we call blanket easements.
Okay.
And each lot unit owner is granted a blanket easement to use ingress and egress, both the access points and all common areas for maintenance of their units, all utilities, services, and otherwise. And blanket easements are granted to all service providers by the homeowners association. And the homeowners association, I believe I included the documents.
That's in the other hearing. Yep.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
But I thought I was asked to provide in this one.
Oh, it might have been in both as well. So.
The HO documents. Yep. So we're creating a nonprofit association, which will be the homeowners association.
Okay.
And they have full legal responsibility to maintain all the common areas. They will have title, meaning the homeowners association will have title to all the lands other than the units themselves.
Okay. Any questions from the board for the subdivision, final plat of the subdivision? Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
I'm just going to state that I'm not going to vote on this because I was not part of this.
Okay.
When it came through, I wasn't on the board.
Okay.
Mr. Carter, good to see you.
Jared Rose? Anything?
No, not right now. So I just want to look further into that and we should be good.
Okay. Any, I know there are some other people who were sworn in. Do you have questions on the final plat for the subdivision. Any other questions from the board? Okay. I make a motion that we close the hearing for the final plat approval for the subdivision.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Is there any hands raised on Zoom there? Okay. All those in favor?
Anybody second it?
Oh, sorry.
I'll second it.
I thought John.
I think John did
Sorry,
too.
my bad. Yeah.
She got those.
Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I heard John, I thought John did too.
And you might as well stay right up there. We'll get to the next one in a second. Next, we're going to open a new public hearing for Jewel Brook LLC. Go ahead, Jared.
This is application number 300-07-CU, amendment number 8, and also 458-17-Act 250, amendment number 4. Applicant is Larry Slayson of Salmon and Ostrin Law Office. Property owner is Mr. Salvatore Maritoli of Jewel Brook LLC. This application is to construct a 44-bedroom condo complex spread over 4 buildings. The project is located in the Village Residential Commercial District, and I have to make a quick note that it was warned in the newspaper as 22 bedrooms, not 44. Accidentally, sorry about that. Hearing date is today, June 10th, 2024, 6 p.m. Public postings were at the town clerk's office, town hall bulletin boards, and post office on May 15th, 2024, town website on May 24th, 2024, and in the Vermont Journal on May 22nd, 2024. The abutting property owners were notified on May 24th, 2024.
Thank you, Jared. If you wish to speak to this hearing and this hearing alone, you will have to be sworn in. If you raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the matter now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? I do.
I do.
How about Mr. Slayson? You tell us about your project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So at this part of the application, we're now seeking construction approval for the project, and that involves conditional use approval, site plan approval, and local Act 250 approval so that the applicant may proceed. So in terms of the record and what's been submitted, and then I'll answer any questions the board may have, the Jewel Brook resubmitted application was filed with the town on December 19, 2023. It was a binder that lawyers like to submit to you folks, but it looks like that. And that's what we submitted, more than you folks probably needed at the time for your initial sketch plan, but it included all the details and the data about the proposed project. And it addressed all the conditional use criteria, the site plan criteria, and the local Act 250 criteria. And then we supplemented those materials with the letter, as I earlier mentioned, to Rose Goings on March 26, 2024, with all the updated allocations, water, wastewater fees, the updated letter from Chief Kalenda, and the like. So all of those are in your possession and have been delivered. In terms of the conditional use review, just taking it in the order that we submitted it, the conditional use criteria were itemized, and all responses are set forth in that December 19, 2023 binder. They're at pages or section, there was an exhibit 5 in that binder. And I should have put tabs on your book, but they're separated by yellow sheets. And so if you get to exhibit 5, that's your standard information for public hearing before your DRB. So what we did there is answered all the questions, filled out your application, and you'll see that I'm looking at it right now, the criterion 1 of the capacity of existing and planned community facilities. All the questions were answered. We described the number of bedrooms. We described the number of buildings. Chief Kalinda at that time had a preliminary letter. Now he's provided a final letter. And Ludlow Light and Electric and Telecom, all the other folks have either responded to the ability to serve letters, or at least those letters were outstanding. But the important ones, police, fire, and emergency, you have. The character of the area was responded to on page 3 of the binder that I'm looking at that was provided to you. And I want to make a correction on the record. I made it last hearing for your plat approval. It's a 1.9 acre parcel, not a 2.21. When surveyor Joe DiBernardo surveyed the entirety of the plat, that was more accurately determined. So I pulled that information, 2.21, from tax maps and prior deeds, but those were incorrect. So it's a 1.98 acre parcel, and that's what's reflected in our final plat. And you have the Mylar, of course. We didn't talk about that already, but we've got a recorded Mylar in your possession, and that's the Mylar that was prepared by Joe DiBernardo, and the 1.98 acres is reflected on that.
Okay. I know we do have that in possession at the office.
Okay. So again, we talk about the character of the area. I'm not going to read it. I know you folks have already reviewed this, so I'm not going to insult you by doing that. We describe the buildings. None of them exceed your zoning height limitations. And the exteriors, we talk about the shingles, the clapboard, all natural materials. And then we go to the next section on traffic. We actually had a traffic impact analysis done by Wall Consulting Group. That's provided in that packet, and that's all the way back in Exhibit 10. But I can tell you that the traffic consultant said it would have minimal impact on traffic. At the highest peak hour trips were 13 peak hour trips. The VTran threshold for a traffic study is 75 peak hour trips. So it was his opinion that there's no adverse impact whatsoever to the local roadways. He also did all the site distances and stopping site distance measurements at the 2 Parker Avenue access points, and determined that those were all in excess of what AASHTO, the Association for Highway Traffic Engineers, require. So you've got ample site distances for your traffic entrance off those 2 points. And all of that data was resubmitted to your select board for the access point or access approval. So I don't think we have to say much more about that. The next part of your conditional use approval is to making sure that the project conforms with your standards. You already have really basically already approved that by approving the 4 lots. The lot area minimums are set. The subdivision plat you just approved shows the building envelopes with the front yard, rear yard setbacks all being preserved. The only other performance standards that you address are noise, and it's residential subdivision, so you're going to have some construction noise for a period of time. But other than that, there's no need for an air pollution control permit. No activities for vibration. There's a lighting plan. I know I'm going quickly if you need me to slow down, but there's a lighting plan that was already approved, not approved, but submitted with that in that binder. And that is back on Exhibit 11. And Engineer Serenity Wolf can address that, but we talk about the pole-mounted fixtures and bollard type fixtures, all downward directed and all dark sky compliant. The landscaping was explained before, but again, it shows pretty clearly on our color diagram here. We've got street side landscaping and trees along Route 100. We've got some additional along Parker Avenue, and some to soften the parking area further on Parker Avenue to where Serenity's pointing right now. No flammable liquids and no above ground LP tanks. There will be 4 buried propane tanks, 1 for each building. So there's no above ground hazards there. Your minimum parking has been provided. And we had this discussion before, and I'll put it on the record again. I know you folks are well aware the legislature has amended a number of the requirements for parking and what are permitted uses versus conditional uses in areas in towns served by public water and sewer. And I'm sure you're aware that as of December 1, for areas served by public water and sewer, only 1.5 spaces will be required for parking, and that'll be a state mandate for those areas served by public water and sewer. So we're more than meeting your requirements presently, and we're providing a whole lot of excess when that law goes into effect in December. That addresses your conditional use criteria. The site plan review is always a part of your conditional use criteria. That's section 260.2. So I'm now looking at my page 7 of the binder I sent you. And again, we addressed briefly the vehicular circulation, the 2 access points, ample parking and ample parking spaces. The adequacy of landscaping we have discussed before, and the lighting is limited, and I earlier addressed that. So that all would be within your purview in terms of site plan review. And then in terms of Ludlow has chosen to do a local Act 250 review, something I've been familiar with for many, many years doing our projects here in Ludlow. It helps us when we go to state Act 250 approval, so we appreciate it. And that's section 280 of your Ludlow zoning regulations. And there's only 3 that towns are authorized to look at. And the one is, will it cause an unreasonable burden on your town to provide educational services? And so it's a second home recreational residential planned community. It's not expected that Jewel Brook owners with school-aged children will become full-time residents. So there's little to no impact there. If you're like most towns, some actual students with declining enrollments, I know in my town we could use more students. Will not cause a burden on the municipality to provide governmental services. Again, the water, wastewater fees have all been paid in advance for our allocation. The project's going to generate a net positive fiscal impact. Chief Kalenda was very pleased that we made adjustments both for his fire apparatus and the way the orientation of the buildings and the emergency or the special access off Route 100, where that will be maintained with no obstructions, as he said in his letter, so he'd be able to get in there emergently. And otherwise, all other aspects of the buildings are fully accessible. So he was pleased, and the police chief thought that they had more than enough ability to deal with this residential project. And the municipal plan identifies this as a mixed village use. And it's an extension of the traditional village center, which it is. And frankly, you know, I'm a little biased, but I think the engineer and architects have designed a tasteful project. And it's been substantially downsized, as you folks know, from a very large commercial hotel with 71 units, then to a project with 28, down to a project with just 22 units, six units in the larger buildings and only 4 units in the smaller. We're going to keep the historical building on site. With that, I think it's a project worthy of your approval, and I can answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Questions from the board? Go ahead, Phil.
I want to talk about the soil. I want to get
the what?
About the soils, the cap.
Yep.
Some of the information we have says that there's still some stuff in the soil, and well, one of the things I'm reading, this risk will be addressed during future corrective actions associated with the redevelopment project via removal and on-site disposal and or capping. So just for the record, where are we at with the cap program, and was it Bretta and?
Brella.
Where are we at with all this? Where do we need to go?
Well, Brella, it's been enrolled in Brella, and the corrective action plans were amended. Remember, they were for the 71-unit hotel, so they've been amended for this project. And the excerpt that I read to you was the latest. Remind me who is our environmental consultant, Eric Ulrich. Atlas, right. And so that was the excerpt from his letter, or actually a copy of the portion of his letter. And I read where he wanted us to make the point that the plan has been approved and all substantial contaminants have been removed from the site already. So,
is there any more, work on your part with soils? Is there another piece?
if there's any soils, well, again,
More mitigation needed?
that's a good question. Correct me, and Serenity, help me. As the civil engineer, if there's any sources of contamination remaining in the soils, those have to be disposed of at an approved landfill. Otherwise, they're capped here on site. So, and I don't want to play engineer. Serenity, why don't you take that forward?
Good evening. I'm Serenity Wolf with Stevens and Associates. So the Brella program has requirements so that they remove hazardous levels of contaminants, but some lower levels of contaminants are allowed to remain on site, provided that there is a cap to protect the population and the species in the environment. So there is an existing cap. There has been remediation already performed on site. When this project, if it is approved, it goes forward, the earth moving would require additional remediation and capping to achieve this. And that is what Eric has been working on and has, I believe, approved through Brella already, contingent on your approval.
Can you just, for the record, describe what capping is?
So capping is an abbreviation for a corrective action plan, and the purpose of the cap is to provide a protective enclosure for contaminants that may remain in the soil. So for example, this needs to be designed by the environmental engineer, so that's not myself, that's Eric. It could be a certain quantity of earth, clean soil above the contaminated soils, or it could be a combination of soil, gravel, asphalt, and concrete. So the finished surfaces that are proposed in this project would meet the cap requirements and be designed to meet the cap requirements that Eric has designed.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I have one for Larry.
Fire away, Phil.
You provided as part of the evidence covenants and restrictions that will apply to this project for the homeowners association. But on every page it says draft. So my question is what you provided as evidence subject to change? And if it doesn't, who enforces it? And would you have a problem if we took this document as presented and made it part of the permit?
Well, I've provided the covenants and restrictions as a model language, standard language that we ordinarily include in our declarations for planned communities. Could some of that change modestly? Yes, it could. I mean, these are the covenants and restrictions that will govern the homeowners. It's unlikely any of those would change.
So you're referring to this here where it says Article 13, covenants and restrictions?
Yes, that's right.
So you believe that that will exist as presented?
I believe it will, and I want.
There's nothing.
It is pretty standard.
But it's also important for the town because obviously there's stuff in here that establishes, the nature of the project and going forward, how it's going to be handled.
Well, there is, and I'm looking for, because I want to be accurate in answering a question, I want to see what I sent Rose and what you have. I'm looking at my Article 13 that was attached to my letter to Rose, and let's see if I can. So if the one you're looking at, for example, Mr. Carter, and I want to make sure we have the same one. The one I sent to Rose with my letter of March 26 to 2024, there's an Article 13, covenants and restrictions. I can represent that we're comfortable with those restrictions. But to make sure we're looking at the same one, look at section 13.17, if you have it in front of you. And it's the intention of this declaration that the planned development will be primarily owner-occupied. Okay, that's still the case. And I thought that would be important for you folks to know that. But yes, so Article 13, and then I also provided, Mr. Carter, and I don't know if it's as important, I provided a draft of Article 9, the association, the creation of the homeowner association, and made it clear it would be responsible for administration, control of all development, and that it will own all the common areas. That I want to state on the record, that could be modified, I don't believe in any significant substantive way, but when I create, or my law firm creates the final planned, the declaration for this planned community, there's always a little bit of wordsmithing that goes on. But I want to give you folks the draft. I can tell you unequivocally that the property will be owned by the homeowners association. They will have complete responsibility. They'll have a legal duty to maintain it. And they'll have a legal duty to collect the dues and make sure it's maintained. And that was the purpose of providing you with that document.
So, I mean, a lot of this stuff really kind of dictates the character of the area of your project. And if one of the homeowners decided to go outside of these covenants and restrictions, what would be the pathway for neighbors to say, hey, you know, that guy's not supposed to have hazardous waste there, and look at that pile? Who would they call? How would that process work?
Well, that's a good question. So it's a couple of things. If it's a violation of a covenant that's binding on the unit owners, the homeowners association has an obligation to enforce the rules and regulations in the covenants. And there's a process both in Vermont's Uniform Common Ownership Act on how you do that, how you enforce your covenants, and that would be followed. If it's a private person in town and a unit owner is violating some other regulation, that falls outside of this. And to the extent that maybe a private person has the right or standing to enforce a covenant, that's a question that's debated at times. Certainly the homeowners association has a duty to enforce it. If it's affecting another person in town and they can demonstrate a potential harm, yes, then they can step forward and seek enforcement.
Well, it would be pretty black and white. I mean, it says in here stuff like you can't do auto repairs and oil changes.
That's right.
You can't get any more black and white than that.
That's
so
right.
If somebody looks over and sees somebody starting up an auto repair business in the parking lot, who do they call?
Well, that's why I think you folks want these as a part of your approval of a planned community. And that's why, again, I'm comfortable with your covenants and restrictions as printed.
Thank you.
I just want to kind of go over the letters from Pete Killen for on the record. So starting with his latest letter, he said all conditions of his letter dated September 17th of 2023 will apply, and I'll go over those in a second. And homeowners association or associations will be established and be responsible for maintenance, repairs, upgrades as needed to the fire alarm system and sprinklers. If any contamination exists from the former oil mill, all contamination must be mitigated before all construction takes place. I'll read from his September 17th letter with his restrictions. A permit is required from the Division of Fire and Safety. Emergency vehicle access off Route 100 will be wide enough to allow fire truck apparatus to turn onto the patio area with one swing. No permanent furniture or structures will be allowed in the patio area. The patio will be constructed to support up to a 68,000-pound fire truck. Snow removal is required for the patio and emergency access entrance. An NFPA 13 sprinkler system is required for all buildings. Provide a fire alarm system and carbon monoxide detectors as required from the Vermont Division of Fire and Safety. A permit submission drawing dated June 14th, 2023 shows a hydrant setting details on page C7. The utilities plan, page C5, do not show any hydrant locations. Hydrant locations must be discussed and approved by this department. Since this is a new construction, a 35-cent per square foot fee would be applied for the equipment fund. Are you okay with all of those things I just read?
Most of those are, the short answer is yes.
Okay.
And the reason for that, lawyers always have long answers, is because most of those are part of your public building and fire safety requirements for the state of Vermont. And Chief Kalenda is making sure that we're aware of those and we're comfortable.
Yeah, and I always like to read those off to make sure they're on the record. The only thing of real question on there was in reference to fire hydrant placement. If you had discussed with him, he talks about how page C7, and this may have changed, and then on C5 it does not show any fire hydrant locations, and I didn't know if you had talked with him per his request to have him approve of the fire hydrants.
He did not request it, so I removed the hydrant setting detail from the detail sheet. If he would like to change his mind, we're happy to add that back in.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
The police letter.
That's where I was heading down. Yep, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So we have the police letter from Chief Billings. And he asks that the project will require additional traffic control measures. There'd be a need to place signs both north and south of the entrance of Parker Avenue, warning of vehicles entering and exiting the roadway. Parking lots will need to remain clear of snowbanks on both entrances to make sure visibility of vehicles remains clear while entering onto Parker Avenue from this site. A camera system to be installed on outside of buildings. Those were his conditions. Is there any issues with any of those?
None.
Okay.
Then going on, just to cover the ambulance letter, that their request would be adequate space at all times for appropriate entering and exiting of emergency vehicles and personnel, that each building be properly numbered with visible from the driveway, and each housing unit be numbered outside the main door for use for entrance and exits in accordance with the E911 standards. Those all?
Those are acceptable.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
On the landscaping, looking at this map here to the very left, which abuts, I believe, Jeannie Strong's property, you have 2 trees shown. Is there, and also along Parker Avenue, where you first turn off of Route 100, I see 5 trees. Is that an accurate number of things, or is it, let's just talk about the landscaping a little bit. Because I know with some other projects that kind of we talked about in this area before, there was concern about screening from those 2 directions.
So
that looks a little light.
to the north, there is an easement on the property which restricts our ability to provide additional screening or landscaping in that area. So we're trying to respect the easement that has been granted to the property owner to the north.
That's Jean Strong.
I believe that is true. To the, along Route 100, all that's shown is the trees, and We have not shown any shrubbery or lower bushes in that area because if you look in the traffic impact memo, there was a request about making sure that no lower plantings were in there to inhibit the site visibility zones. There are smaller plantings proposed internal and adjacent, internal to the courtyard and adjacent to the buildings. I think an important thing for the neighbors to understand is that the parking lot that you would see first as you come onto Parker, the way that the grading of the site works, that parking lot is going to be lower than the grade of Parker Avenue, which will help provide additional screening to the site just by the natural grade.
So just one question to kind of piggyback off Phil's there. I'm looking at C3 of the layout plan where it's got the trees depicted inside the 10-foot zoning setback. Is that, what's the plan with those?
We were planning and planting there, but if you'd like us to move them, we can.
What's the board's thought on that? So that's, so right here's the setback, and they've got a bunch of trees planted inside the setback.
What's that?
So I'm looking at these trees along 100 that are inside the setback. Okay. No, I just see stuff inside the setback, so I'd bring it up for discussion.
What kind of trees are gonna be on Andover Street side?
I don't remember that we've specified species. I'd have to look at the plan.
They won't block their view coming off in Parker Avenue?
Correct. So the objective is for them to be mature street trees. So obviously when trees get planted, they're much smaller than what they mature at. So there will be trunks, but there should not be dense vegetation within the site visibility zone for a car.
So you're planting fairly large trees then?
Yes, the objective is to create like a street tree.
Okay.
Which is going to mature out 30
It
to
looks like
50
you got
feet.
2 rows of trees right there.
Yes, sir.
One other question I had depicted on your map is a riparian buffer that comes from the river. The 50-foot buffer cuts across some of the developed areas. And when referencing the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources acceptable activities within the buffer zones, I'll pull from their guidance here. It says generally undisturbed means no construction, no earth moving activities, no storage of materials, no tree, shrub, or ground cover removal and mowing. So what, being that you're encroaching on that, I just want to hear what you're.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to speak to that. So in previous Act 250 approvals, there was a riparian buffer management plan that was approved that approved certain impacts within this. This plan proposes to reduce the impacts from previous approved plans.
Okay. Any other board member questions? Oh, go ahead, Rose.
Hi. So I have 2 questions. One is about the riparian buffer, and it's my understanding that they have to have a letter of approval to be working in that area or to build in that area. So I just want to make sure that they have that. And my second question is about the fire hydrants locations. And Serenity Wolf said that Pete Kalinda had them removed or something, but I'm wondering, did he ask for them to be removed or did he just not mention it again? And should that be readdressed?
So Pete Kalinda did not specifically ask for them to be removed. He did not ask for a fire hydrant on site, which is why I removed the detail. I'm happy to reach out to him again and see if I can get a response from him. As far as the riparian sign-off, are you discussing or referencing the riparian sign-off for Act 250, Rose?
Yeah, you had one, if you had a riparian okay from Act 250 before. Do you have copies of that?
So I believe that's on the record with Act 250, but I don't think that that's been directly submitted to the town. Is that accurate, Larry?
Well, we haven't submitted the prior Act 250 permit, but the prior project authorized more encroachments into this area than we're presently proposing. So we've been in touch with the agency and they're pleased with the plan, but that's where this sits. We have not submitted the Act 250 application. We're going to submit it once we receive approval from the town.
And it was depicted on the map, and that was what brought forth a lot of questions. We know there are some restrictions and guidelines that they like to see.
Yeah, we're confident that we can get Act 250 approval because our project is substantially less encroachments.
Okay. Did you have any more questions, Rose? Okay. Jared, do you have any questions?
No, I did not.
Board member questions? I got another one for you, Larry. So it would be on page, this would be Exhibit 1, and it's the one with the project summary. Just talks a little bit about lot coverage, and the percentages that you gave. I just did some quick math there, and that only included the buildings. I didn't know if you had one about a percentage that covered non-pervious material percentage.
You can address that. I'm not aware there's any other.
Okay.
I don't think there's any other impervious surfaces, but I want my engineer to confirm that.
I'd love to answer that question.
Okay, fire away.
The only impervious surfaces on site are the buildings, the stairs, and the concrete dumpster pads. As you heard previously in Brookhaven's hearing, we will also be utilizing pervious paver surfaces, and these will be designed to be non-jurisdictional and approved by the Vermont Stormwater Program, which allow stormwater to infiltrate and be stored into a crushed stone reservoir and then infiltrate into the soils, as they would say on a grass surface.
Okay, can you just depict on your big board of where all that area is going to be?
Sure, I'm going to give a verbal description
Sure.
and then I can go point.
Yeah.
So basically all of the areas that are shown in gray, and then additionally all of the areas that are shown kind of in that yellow color. So
Okay.
that will be the vehicular circulation areas as well as the pedestrian circulation
So
areas.
what's the difference between the two in the systems?
It will be aesthetic primarily.
Okay.
And what loads they are designed for. So, and that will impact the amount of stone that is provided underneath them and perhaps the thickness of the actual concrete paver itself. So in the colored rendering, I was trying to help you guys understand sort of the aesthetic impression of the site. And so likely I would expect our client would pick one set of pavers for the parking area and then a different color, texture, style pavers for the pedestrian areas.
And being that in the middle there, that pavered area is going to support a fire truck that's capable
Yes, sir.
to meet that standard?
Yes, it will be designed to meet that,
Okay.
yes.
Other questions from the board?
What is that right there in front of building 3 with this here?
So that's a pergola and it will not be permanently restricted. I don't think that it can be there given the letter that the chief said.
Yeah, that's why I was asking.
So I'll repeat that for the record. There is a pergola shown that will not be able to be included, and given the comments that the chief made about any sort of permanent structure, the plan was not for it to be permanent, but it was large enough that he had concerns about it, so that will be removed
Okay.
From construction.
So looking at the buildings, it looks like there's entries on both sides. Can you just kind of give us a quick walkthrough of entrances and exits? Is it,
Yes.
for each of those units?
Yes, so there are entrances and exits from both sides of sort of the long edges of all of the buildings. Primary entrances will be for the buildings that run north-south, which are buildings 1, 2, and 4. primary entrances will be on the west side of the building. The entrances or exits from the east side of the building will be like sliding doors.
Oh, okay.
So they'll have a more sort of a private feel to them as opposed to like a primary entrance. For building 3, which runs east-west, the primary entrances will be on the north side of the building, and then the sliders will be on the south side of the building.
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
The current office building, you said is going to remain there.
Yes, that's the historic building, sir.
Do you have any, what's going on with it? What are you going to do with it?
I would need to defer to our client on the planned use of that.
I'm sorry, what?
I need to defer to our client on what the planned use of that building would be.
And Sal was sworn in. He's on Zoom. You might be able to provide a comment.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we got you loud and clear, Sal. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, you know, it's somewhat undetermined. I think of that building as like a gathering place, a common gathering place. Maybe there'd be a pool table in there. Maybe there'd be, a coffee bar in there. So if you're waiting for the Okemo shuttle, you can grab a cup of coffee and stay warm in that building. And that's really about the extent of the use, somehow incorporating that into the overall project as a lightly used common building.
And Sal, Larry Slayson, I don't know if you can see me or hear me, but we earlier discussed the fact that you'd have a conference room section in that building so that the homeowners association could hold their meetings in that building. Is that still consistent?
Yes, it is. Yeah, there's really two rooms in that building, and one would be light recreational, and the other building would have a small table in it if somebody wanted to have a meeting or if the association wanted to have a meeting.
Did that answer your question, Phil, or do you have more to add? Okay. Want to just take a quick detour and talk about trash. So I see you got 2 dumpsters depicted. Just want to talk to me about your trash plan and what those 2 pads entail.
So the plan is for there to be dumpsters located in 2 locations that would have common pickup. The expectation is that individual unit owners would bring their garbage to the dumpster, and then the trucks would come and collect from the dumpster. So there would not be individual pickup from the units.
Okay. And are those going to be fenced or some sort of?
Yes.
Okay.
On that same thread, is that all recycles? Will all those recycles be separated?
They would need to
According to
be
the state?
enclosed in those areas as well, yes.
Other questions from the board?
Snow removal, since we're talking about practical things.
Yeah.
Plan for I mean, your parking spaces are here, but big snowstorm, that snow's got to go somewhere. Any thoughts?
Maybe Mr. Maritoli does, but the homeowners intends to enter into a contract for snow removal. It'll be their responsibility to keep it clear, particularly the area for emergency access for your fire and rescue. Beyond that, Mr. Carter, I can't be more specific.
Well, I'm just, where my mind was going is if there's not a good plan for snow removal, people can't park in the parking lot. Are they gonna park on Parker Avenue?
The intent is to keep the parking lot clear of snow and have the snow removed, Mr. Carter, but I can't be more specific.
So we could condition that, that snow removal is prompt, snow removal is thorough, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think you've done that for
Maybe you
other.
guys figure out how to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've done that for other projects in town, that snow shall be removed within a reasonable period of time. Up on the mountain, it was within 48 hours, but I'm not sure whether or not you want to put in a time frame. But I'm sure the applicant, and Mr. Maritoli, correct me if I'm wrong, that snow shall be removed from the from the parking areas, and that the parking spaces shall be preserved during the winter, accessible during the winter.
And that will also include the fire lane as well, based off the note.
That's Chief Calenda's request, yes.
Just a quick, I want to touch a little quick on lighting. I know you kind of mentioned you had a lighting plan, but can you just walk us through that?
Sure thing. If you look at C5, the utilities plan, you'll see that there's a couple of different light symbols. So there's 3 forms of lighting on the site. One is building-mounted lighting. 2 is sort of a pole-mounted lighting that will be in the parking areas. And then the 3rd is bollard lighting. There will be, the objective is to provide adequate lighting without overlighting, and that the majority of the lighting would come from the building-mounted lighting and then be supplemented by pole lighting in the parking areas. You'll notice that between buildings 2 and 3 and then 2 and 1, so sort of in that courtyard area, there's additional bollard lighting. And the objective is that that lighting will be lower to the ground to reduce potential impacts to neighbors and abutters. All lighting will be fully shielded, downcast, night sky compliant lighting.
So when you, just for the record, can you describe bollard, how do you say it?
A bollard. Bollard lighting is going to be approximately 36 inches or less, as opposed to the parking lot lighting, which is going to be about 12 feet. Okay. So again, the purpose was to provide lighting that is lower, closer to the ground, and has reduced impacts on abutters.
And just for clarification of some symbols, that's indicated with the broken circle with the square with the lines through it?
Can I see what you're looking at?
Yeah. So I'm looking, so I'm on C5, so I'm looking, so we've got like 3 in a row.
That's a catch basin.
Oh, okay.
So the bollard lights
Are these assigned? Okay.
And then see the square?
With the shade?
With the shading?
Yep.
That's a whole light. And all the
Okay. Okay, cool, thanks.
Our site plans are right here.
So to repeat that for the record, on C5, bollard lighting is shown with a circle with lines radiating from it. It looks kind of like the sun.
C3?
C5.
Oh.
And then the pole-mounted lighting is shown as a square with cross-hatching through it, and that's in the parking areas.
And what's the building, you said there's also going to be some building mounted lighting, and what
Yes.
symbol is that count?
I don't know that it's shown on my
Okay.
plan.
I'm just curious.
That's fair. It is not shown on my site plan.
Okay. Any other questions from the board members?
Just that all the lighting is, it would meet the night sky lighting.
Yes.
Jared or Rose, you guys have any more questions to add?
I'm good.
Oh,
I believe Sal wanted to chime in
Oh.
on something about snow removal before we moved on to the
oh,
lighting.
okay. Sorry, Sal. Sorry we missed you there. If you want to chime in on that now.
Well, can you hear me okay?
We got you loud and clear.
Yeah, so, if you do run out of space, we generally haul excess snow off-site, not uncommon. And, that would be a condition that we place on our, snow removal folks.
Thanks, Sal. Any other questions from the board? I know we've got a bunch of people in the crowd that had been sworn in before I go to them. Okay. I know there was a bunch of people who were sworn in from the crowd that had questions. Andrew raised her hand first. Go ahead. You gotta come up to the podium. It's not gonna reach,
It doesn't. It's
there's not
actually-
enough cable.
It's actually
unfor-
tied to a
Yeah.
leg under the
Sorry.
under the stage.
have a couple of questions. Jean Strong, 7 Parker Avenue. My first question is the easement there at the end of the development. Is that the same dimensions as the easements that has shown in other projects? I haven't seen the plan other than this one, so it's the same. Yes, I haven't seen it. So, the other thing is regarding the tree line. I'd like to be just consulted or part of the tree line there so that it's not like big pine trees or something like that.
On the portion that abuts your property? So currently depicted, there are only 2 trees.
Right.
Are those of the same variety that you were going to plant along the road?
Sorry. Too many papers. So this one is listed as CC, which is called out as.
That was her primary question. Her second is any question about these trees that are here.
Okay. So it's an eastern redbud, which is there. And that one is a bit trimmed off, but I think that's a sugar maple.
Sorry for the record, Jen, I'm sitting down, but I think you're referring to layout plan sheet C3.
Yep, and we're looking at the 2 trees, Jean, the abutter there, just to the north. She was inquiring about the trees that are located there along the easement.
Yep, so they're a redbud and a maple.
Okay.
I believe so. I just need to think about it a little bit and look at the spot. The other question I have, and I know you've talked about it regarding snow removal. One of the things that happens on Parker Avenue beyond this new project is cars aren't able to get up on certain roads. So a lot of people park on Parker Avenue. And when they do that, another car can barely get by, say nothing of a fire truck. That's happening now. It's not part of this project, but if for some reason people can't get to the parking lot, it's likely they're going to have to park on Parker Avenue, which isn't very wide. So you might want to consider no parking on the avenue.
Yeah, understand your concerns. They have provided beyond extra parking, and I think the conditions of the snow removal for the parking lot would cover those concerns.
Okay.
Would the applicant be adverse to placing no parking signs on Parker Avenue?
Well, I don't know. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure we have jurisdiction to do that.
I'm not sure either.
And any signs placed have to comply with the MUTCD, you board member, that's the manual.
Yeah.
Uniform traffic control devices. So I don't want my client responsible for posting a town road.
Okay.
Something we can pass along. Any other concerns, Jean?
Trash removal, you already discussed that, but it doesn't look like a lot of trash containers for that many buildings if they were all full. Holidays, that time. Let's see. And the only other question that I had which the board already talked about, was being able to contact the homeowners association if something wasn't being taken care of. But I suspect that that information will be available.
One potential is maybe on our community building, having a sign with a contact number. Would you be
Yes.
opposed against that, Larry?
That would, yeah.
That sounds reasonable.
I think that kind of solves all potential
Mhm.
conflicts that way. What else do you have, Gene?
That's all I have right now.
Okay.
Basically, the project looks good.
Appreciate your comments. So I know we had some other people with their hands. Go ahead, Andrea.
I know everyone is tired and wants to get home, but thank you for hearing me out. First, I want to thank the board and Rose. It seems like this situation across the street from me has been going on for many, many years, and we're all tired and we're looking for closure on this. But what was brought up tonight was very concerning to me. I am an abutter. I've lived, I can throw a stone and I'll be able to hit these buildings. So I'm very concerned. And several years ago, that site was a brownfield assessment program site, meaning it was polluted and it had toxins. And I worked with the people from the state to check my property for contaminants since I was living there. And when he said about the soil, I do believe that an air pollution study or some kind of intervention to study what goes on over there, because it does affect the abutters. This is the residential component of this. I realize it's going to go forward, and I'm grateful it's not a 71-room hotel, but it will change the landscape and our lifestyle on Andover Street. People right now pull into my driveway thinking it's a parking lot, and I can imagine what will happen if there's no place to park over there. But that's a problem I'll have to deal with. But as far as the abutters on that road, we need to know. Did you get a copy of that program that was taken by the state, the environmental protection people? That was one of the cited brownfield sites when that building was taken down and all the bad things that took place over
So
there.
we have the latest report that was, so Brownfields Environmental Limited Liability.
Do you have a copy of what they found and that the public can see and know?
We've got quite a few different sources that they've been provided about what they found when they did the initial one. I don't know if I've necessarily read that. I mean, I've read about what the current mitigation plan status is and what remains, which has been put down pretty low to zero.
So there is a current mitigation
Yep,
program?
and
for
Larry or them can respond to that. I guess just want to reiterate that. We talked about the CAP program and stuff, but.
Yeah, so the site is currently enrolled in the BRELA program, which provides the oversight for the contamination on site. And so there is an environmental engineer who is working with us to make sure that whatever we design provides adequate protection for you and all of the other species that enter the site.
Okay, and we'll be privileged to the information as it comes forward, so we know what you find and what becomes airborne and.
Absolutely, that's all publicly available through the BRELA program.
So we have their latest revision, I think it was July, was from Atlas that was submitted, which is the company that they hired.
I know that the initial study was done years ago when the building came down, but they did find, well, you remember what the building looked like. It was pretty bad. So Sal, I'm grateful that you took it down, but our health and well-being on Andover Street is very important to me and my family.
Understand that.
Thank you.
No problem.
Excuse me, can you say your first and last name?
Andrea Sanders.
Okay, thank you.
Sal, if I may.
Go ahead.
Sal, I'll give you an opportunity to speak to this if you wish, but I'm going to do a plug for my client. After the town asked that he get involved to help remediate the site years ago, he spent an awful lot of money making sure the site implemented a corrective action plan. And so that's why we have the status today where the bulk of, you've got a letter that says the contaminated materials have been removed. An awful lot of hard work's been done and a lot of Mr. Maritoli's personal resources have been expended to make the site much, much improved over what it was. And we cannot continue to construct unless we're fully in conformance with the state of Vermont brownfields remediation program.
Thank you. I know that, was there any other hands of people who had questions from the crowd or on Zoom?
Probably Steve.
Oh, go ahead.
Hang on.
Good evening. My name is Pat
And just
Archambault.
sorry, can you just state your name for the record? Sorry.
Pat Archambault.
Oh, okay, thanks.
I live on Andover Street, and one of the things that I've been listening to tonight is that various duties and responsibilities are going to be turned over to the homeowners association. I'd like to hear more about that, because I would think there would be a period of people moving in, so there might not be a lot of homeowners to take on those responsibilities. So I'm just curious as to, what will be bridging that gap that the homeowners take on responsibility for various projects and tasks.
Sure. You want to respond to that?
I can. I think that's an excellent question. There is and that is a very good question. There is a transition, as you folks probably know, approving all the projects in this community. When there's a planned development and units are sold, the developer retains responsibility until control is turned over to the board, and it's usually at 80% of the sale of the units. It's required under the Common Interest Community Act of Vermont. So the developer, the project developer, remains responsible, but on day one, there will be the creation of a homeowners association, and as units are sold, and people then buy units, they're automatically a member of the HOA. The HOA assesses dues on an annual budget, and over a period of time, as the project is built out, it gets up to 80%. The HOA takes over Mr. Maritoli's responsibilities.
And that was outlined in, was it number 9?
I was hopeful I did, but I forgot.
Yeah.
Who sets it up? Well, their lawyer sets it up legally. It becomes a corporation. You can look it up on the Secretary of State, and it'll be a Jewel Brook Homeowners Association, and it'll be a nonprofit corporation, and all the unit owners will be a member of that association. And when you set up a project like this, it's a legal document called the declaration, and that's what establishes all these legal rights and obligations.
So it was something set up by you and your attorneys that becomes the homeowner's responsibility?
The homeowner association, yes, is all the unit owners. They are responsible for maintaining that entity, that project site. That's right. That's right. When they take a deed to the unit, they have to. That's correct. That's what happens. And it's an obligation when they are transferred a unit on their deed. It's obligated. They are obligated, and to become a member of the association. And the declaration, the legal document, becomes binding on their property. That's how it's set up.
Was there any more questions from the crowd or on Zoom? Okay, so we got one from Zoom. Go ahead. Were you sworn in, Steve?
I believe so, yes.
I saw his hand up.
Okay, sounds good. Go ahead, Steve.
I'm just, on the last of my knowledge, the soil samples that were delivered from the state deemed it I believe the wording was unusable for residential areas. And as someone who's lived at 81 Andover Street next door to this property for 20 plus years. Since the building came down, there has been zero soil removed from there. So to hear on record someone say that the soil has all been removed is, I have to say, unless I didn't see it for months at a time and giant excavators moving soil. And as far as I read it through the state's notes, that they had to leave it on site for a year covered with a 100-foot buffer has never been done. So the soils that were tested to be contaminated and unapproved for residential use are still sitting in the exact same spot that they were day one that the building came down. And I guess I would just like to bring that up on the record to the board.
Go ahead with a
May I
response.
speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I
Fire
would
away.
like to clarify that the soils were not removed, they were remediated. And that in the proposed plan, some soils will be removed from the site, and those are the soils that would need to go to a hazardous landfill, which Larry referenced previously.
Big wear. I know.
There you go.
Come on now.
I apologize, Scott.
Go ahead, Steve.
I apologize, I'm at work. So the soils in the declaration from the state said that they needed to be fully dug up, replaced, and sat for a year while covered, then retested and see if they could be used as fill again on site. None of that has been done. So are you saying, Serenity, that you're gonna do that in the future before building ever exists or starts? Is that what you're saying?
So my understanding is, and I would have to defer to Eric's report, that if soils that are currently on site need to be removed for the grading of the site, which is currently what is proposed, those soils that need to be removed have to go to a hazardous landfill because they do not currently meet the requirements for on-site fill.
Can you just speak on how, as you said, it was remediated? Can you just give a quick synopsis again on how it was remediated to its current status when the building was torn down?
I don't know that I can give that
Okay.
answer to you. I apologize.
And
got any more questions?
Again, just to the board. To the board, nothing has been done soil-wise there. The building was taken down. Mr. Maritoli took the building down, paid to get that part of the building put to the correct landfills. Nothing has been done with the soil. So when I see something from the state that says it's hazardous to everyone involved, unusable as a residential area, then I will fully attest on record to the board that nothing has been done with the soil. So you're at best taking a dice roll that it will all of a sudden have cured itself because the soil was deemed contaminated and not approved for residential use. And it has not been moved. Not one grain of sand has been moved off that property.
Thanks, Steve,
So
for your comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? It's Sal again.
Yep, we got you, Sal. Go ahead.
Yeah, so 16 years ago, when I purchased the property, as you all know, the mill building was there. And we worked extremely closely with the state of Vermont. In fact, we were enrolled in the Vermont Brownfields program. And primarily the contamination was number 2 fuel oil. And that fuel oil was removed. And I don't think it required giant earth moving equipment. And what's remaining there, we have a capable engineer, Atlas Engineering, and their lead engineer has been on this program, on this project for many years. Brella is informed on a regular basis of what the corrective action plan needs to do to remediate if we find anything. So the Brella program lays out a soil testing program, and then if there is what they refer to sometimes as a hot spot, then the soil around that, the soil around that hotspot is removed. There may be no more, there may be nothing there other than the number 2 fuel oil. But Brella and our engineer will assure all of us that if there were any hot spots or there were anything left there, that they would be removed.
Thanks, Sal. Appreciate the comments. Any other question? Oh, sorry. Good.
Probably lawyers curse saying to me, going
Nope,
on.
that's fine. Go ahead. Fire
I can
away.
assure you that the Barilla will not authorize residential dwellings and occupancy until they're satisfied the site is safe.
Thanks. Any other questions from community members that were sworn in?
One more thing, George, I'm sorry.
Okay, one more question from you, Steve. Go ahead.
I believe, don't quote me on the number, but I believe it was over 1,000 cubic yards that needed to be removed, tested, and kept on site for over a year to see if it was deemed residentially usable. So I just have a hard time granting a permit without those soil tests being done. That amount of soil that was deemed by the state to be removed and tested and capped should be dealt with before this building even moves an inch forward.
Thanks for your comments, Steve.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from you, John? Any other questions from Jared, Rose?
I'm good.
What was that, Rose? Oh, okay.
No, I said I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, came through garbled. Any, is that Jared? Anything else? Hands up or anything?
Patricia Murphy just joined us. Didn't know if she was wanting to say something. But
No. Okay.
guess not.
I make a motion that we close this hearing.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and patience.
Thank you, board.
Okay. Next, we're going to open a new public hearing for Jonathan Dubinsky. Go ahead, Jared.
This is application number SUB 24-003. The applicant is Mr. Jonathan Dubinsky. Property owner is the same. The application is to subdivide one 2.45 acre lot into 3 lots, 0.61 acres, 0.62 acres, and 1.24 acres. Is the result, this project is located in the Village Residential District. Hearing date is today, June 10th, 2024, 6 p.m. Public posting was at Town Clerk's Office, Town Hall Bulletin Boards, Post Office on May 15th, 2024, Town website on May 24th, 2024, the Vermont Journal on May 22nd, 2024, and the property owners were abutting property owners were notified on May 24, 2024.
Thanks, Jared. For those who are here to speak on behalf of this hearing and only this hearing, you do have to be sworn in. Please repeat after me and raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the matter now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? I do.
I do.
Okay, tell us about your project.
I'm Jonathan Dubinsky. I own 81 Pleasant Street. It's about 2.5 acres before the extension, I believe, starts. And we installed 2 tiny homes on top of the hill at the first portion of the front of the lot. I think it runs about 1,200 feet along Pleasant Street. And my family and I loved it so much that we thought about building a real house. And then next to the tiny homes, there's like a little river and a culvert that comes down underneath the railroad tracks. And then there's this old dilapidated shack that's been there. I didn't put it there, but it's been there for a while. And it presents a nice flat spot to maybe look at building something down the road. Unfortunately, I have no money, so we don't have any plans to build it anytime soon, but we thought, let's subdivide, you know, should we decide to build something there, and then we don't need the rest of it. And I believe it was like, I think in the village there, it's pretty much quarter acre zoning, more or less, but with the topography of the land, we wanted to give that last lot where it gets a little steeper, lots of run, so if anyone in the future wants to buy it or develop it, they can get up to where it kind of gets flatter at the top of the sloped area. So we try to divide it so it makes sense to be easy to develop if somebody should choose to do that. Because we don't need that much acreage for our intended purposes.
Thanks. Questions from the board members?
Is the building you talked about, they called it the shack?
Yeah.
Is that permitted and do you pay taxes on it?
It was there when we bought the land. It's on the survey we got when we purchased the land, it was called Clubhouse. There's no utilities run to it. It's sitting on top of what looks like piers or like telephone poles as a foundation, quote unquote foundation. It's falling apart, so I don't think so. Because when we got the first tax bill, it was pretty much unimproved land. And then when we had the tiny homes, then the taxes went up. But I don't think it's considered a building. But that predates me.
Other questions from the board?
Maybe if you could just explain the right-of-way of the railroad and the proximity. How much right-of-way do they own toward your property?
You know, I was trying to find that out, and they were one of our abutters, right? So we notified them of this. And I think from like the center track, it wasn't that much, but the concern was obviously the topography. So we don't want to go anywhere near there. We don't want to undermine the railroad track, should someone want to build on it. But I don't think we're anywhere close to their right-of-way slash if they have an easement. Because it goes back, I think, the widest part, the deepest parts, I think it's like about 200 something feet, and then there's a pinch point where it gets down to like 65 feet from the road to the railroad track, or to the back property line, I should say. And then there's a little space, and then the railroad tracks are at the top. But these are conforming lots. They fit all the frontage, total lot size, et cetera. They're just chopping it up.
So question in regards to access permits. So when you create a new lot, you need to have an access permit of some variety. So I see you have one here for one of the new lots, and you do not have one.
So we did apply for the other one.
Can you just say that one more time?
We applied for the third lot, so proposed lot C, I think?
Lot 2C.
2C, yeah. So we sent the application, and we sent the plans to Ron. And I didn't know I was going to be put on the calendar. I just got the certified letter saying, hey, you're on the calendar for June. I figured it would be in July because I thought we had to wait for Ron, but maybe Jared or Rose can speak to if they received it from Ron, the second access permit.
Rose, Jared?
We received the application, yes.
Okay.
We forwarded it off to Ron, and Ron has not gotten back to us yet.
Okay, so we're still waiting on that.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
And just to be clear, that's the access for the proposed lot 2C.
Yeah, I do have, because I have my engineer updated the set of plans that shows where it's going. It's going down towards the far end, so I guess that would be east. So west of the other stream that runs down from the railroad tracks. So
that's where they're depicted.
So I have a PDF in my phone, if anyone wants to see it, but we didn't print out 7 copies and FedEx for you guys.
That's a pretty steep bank there, isn't it?
Which is why we're given like several hundred feet of run should someone choose to do something with that lot. That's why it's 0.6, 0.6, and 1, right? Because that way you have lots. Because there's some nice flat spots. My neighbor towards the extension side is at the top, and his driveway is pretty steep, and it's not a lot of run. So we figured that's not a fun driveway in the winter. So we wanted to give more run should someone or us decide to do anything with something on one of those flat spots at the top of the slope.
Any other questions from the board members?
I guess my question is if we can even approve even this preliminary without knowing if there's what the right-of-way is from the railroad track, I don't know it. And what, if there's a
But the right of way would
access
be if
in.
I'm building something, right? So wouldn't that be if I were to build something?
I guess that'd be that, but just if we can't have an access to it, if he doesn't have a permit from,
Yeah,
approval from Ron Tarable, I don't know how we can
Oh,
approve
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. So again, I didn't ask to be on the calendar for this, this date, but I got the letter, so I drove up. So I assume we were waiting for that second access permit, but figured I'd come say hi.
sounded like you had another question.
No.
Oh, okay.
I actually don't.
Okay. Rose, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it sounds like until we have that
Yeah,
information.
just didn't know if Rose or Jared had anything else they wanted to add.
Rose does?
Rose, go ahead.
I think that Julie has a good point, and we do need to have, there was another gentleman who, any people that want permits along the railroad track usually get a letter from the railroad stating that it's okay, it's good enough, and even if it's a proposal, because the tracks are so close to these properties. And I believe there's a culvert there somewhere, and I'm not sure, maybe that's why Ron hasn't gotten back to us yet, because there's a culvert at the bottom of that area. And I don't know if they have to move the culvert to allow it access, but that's something that needs to be looked at by Ron, and that might be why he hasn't gotten back to us yet.
Well, he gave me we talked about that culvert, or he said it's kind of more like a drainage, it's like more like stone underneath the roadway towards like the shoulder. He said that, yeah, what I intend on doing, just putting a driveway on top, doesn't impact that, because it's not, he said just don't dig down, and then we're fine. Which is why he gave me the permit for lot 2B, because it's the same situation down for 2C. I just haven't received, it was
Okay.
literally mailed last week, because
No, that's
when I
okay. So the two things that we'd be looking for is we're going to need that third access permit.
Yep.
And ideally a comment letter from the railroad in regards,
Well, comment on what, if we're not building anything?
you're subdividing land, adding driveways,
What am I asking them?
if they have a comment on the subdivision.
Okay.
Yep, so we've had other applications, and they're an interested party and a butter.
Sure.
And being that of the topography of that is so, that any sort of I mean, that's for them to make a decision if they want to weigh in on an impact. It's worthy to have their opinion, since we're waiting for that access permit.
Sure.
Try to reach out to them. Any other questions from the board?
Do you know who I contact? Because all I had was an address for the certified mailer for the abutting list. I don't know who I'd speak to at the
You know
railroad.
that name, Jared or Rose?
I can.
We probably can find that for you and get that to you.
Great, yep.
I think you were the only gentleman sworn in, but anyone on Zoom or any more questions? Okay. I make a motion that we recess Jonathan Dubinsky's hearing until next month.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much for coming.
Sure.
We'll see you next month.
You know, you don't all have to drive all the way from New Jersey just for this. You can forward stuff to the planning committee.
Next, we're going to open a new public hearing for Gill Terrace LLC.
This application is sub 23-015, amendment number 1. Applicant Eric Alden, property owner is the same. Project description is the final plat approval for a subdivision located in the Village Residential District. The hearing date is today, June 10th, 2024, 6 p.m. Public postings with the town clerk's office, town hall bulletin boards, post office on May 15th, 2024, town website on May 24th, 2024, and the Vermont Journal on May 22nd, 2024. The abutting property owners were notified on May 24th, 2024, and I believe the applicant does have an attorney or agent present by the name of Ted Reeves.
Thanks, Jared. For all those who wish to speak to this case and this case alone, do you have to be sworn in? Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the matter now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Okay. Let's walk us through. Oh.
I'm going to recuse because, again, I was not.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Go ahead, Ted. Walk us through what you got.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ted Reeves from Reeves Consulting, and I'm the engineer doing the work for Mr. Alden and Gus. Gill Terrace LLC, thanks. So this is our, we're looking for a final plat approval for the project. You reviewed it back in last fall and gave us a decision at the December hearing, which came through in January. And as a result of that, we were asked to address several comments in that decision. So I wrote you a letter on May 13th, which goes through each of those comments and the sections of the planning and design standards. So I've addressed each of those in that letter. I'm not going to go through it line by line because it's 6 pages long. Some of it's pretty dry. I will let you know that we have submitted an access permit application to Ron Tarble. Haven't heard anything back on that yet.
We do have one.
You do?
If you want to see it.
Yeah, I'd love to.
1 second. I just had it here. There you go. I might even have that too. Or is that a new one?
No, that's one, for the record, I just handed over a wastewater disposal and potable water system permit from the state of Vermont. And that is for the entirety of the new Lot 1 and Lot 3 in the subdivision plans that you've had. Also in the submittal package that I gave on May 13th is revised design drawings C1 and C2 and a new drawing C3, which covers erosion control details. I'll note that this property, because it's so small, it doesn't qualify or require a stormwater construction permit under the rules from the state of Vermont, excuse me, or an operational permit, because we don't trigger either of the half-acre thresholds. Also in the package that I gave you on May 13th is a recordable Mylar, and all of the pins have been set by Dave Rose up on the property. So I think I'll stop there and I'll let you guys ask questions if you want.
Do you have any questions? Does the board have any questions?
I don't.
Rose, Jared, you guys have anything to add?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. And just to put this on the record, there is a proposed house on one of the lots, and this only has to do with the final plot subdivision and is not approval
Correct.
for
So
the house.
on Lot 1, we have permitted for water and wastewater a 5-bedroom, single-family residence. That's the only development that potentially could take place, but Gill Terrace LLC is not going to do the building. They want to sell the property with the entitlements, and whoever picks it up then would have to then come before the town with a building permit application before.
I always like to just say that on the record,
Nope, got it.
clarification for all people. Sorry, go
Right,
ahead.
and so also I'll say that Lot 3, which is the back parcel where the old garage is, that's called a deferral lot in terms of water wastewater permits, meaning that nobody can do anything there until they go to the state and get a water wastewater permit and get water and wastewater allocations from the village of Ludlow.
Okay, appreciate that clarification.
Sure.
Any questions from the board? Was there a hand up? Sorry. Is that what you were
This
motioning?
lady was wanting to ask a question.
Oh, and you were sworn in, ma'am? Okay, go ahead. You can gladly ask your question. Sorry, I missed your hand.
My name is Bernadette Curtis. I live at 16 Gill Terrace. On the plot here, it is tax lot 4265, which they have labeled Ulrike Donahue, but I bought it from Ulrike a couple years ago. I'd like to just make a statement because I feel like this is going to happen whether I say something or not. I feel that the recent purchase or sale of what's now lots 1, 2, 3, and the 2.7 acre lot, which borders the Gill Retirement Home, is part of a multi-phase project, which is sort of being hid under the development or asking you to approve lot 1. And I say that because I feel in their letter that was written by Reeves Consulting addressing some of the concerns that were raised by neighbors at the last meeting, specifically the Cromwells and the Donahues regarding traffic. The applicant feels that traffic is not going to be consequential because we're really just, this meeting is really just about lot 1. But my point is that the traffic and other issues about density, I hope that the board is thinking ahead that we will be developing not only lot 1, but there will be a renovation of lot 2, and who knows what's going to happen on the 1 acre lot 3, and who knows what's going to happen on the 2.7 acre lot, which borders the retirement home. So I hope that the board is thinking ahead and is mindful of the fact that even though specific questions were asked and answered by Reeves Consulting with regard to lot 1, that we should be thinking that this is a multi-phase project, and we will be talking about not just the sale of one property, but potentially if the, if we look at 0.25 acres as the minimum size lot, we could be looking at, 11, 12 lots, and I'm including the 2.7 acre lot, which is not a topic for tonight's conversation. Section 1.2 of the subdivision description says that the intention of your board is to protect Ludlow's rural character, unique sense of place, including its cultural heritage, its scenic resources, and its traditional working landscape of a village surrounded by an open countryside. That's what I bought 2 years ago. I bought a beautiful lot that has a great view, lots of green land, and I'm losing that. I'm going to lose that. And I'm upset about it. I probably can't do much about it, but I think that you should know that this is having an impact on the neighborhood. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any questions from the board? Is there anything on Zoom, Jared?
Negative.
Okay. I make a motion that we close this hearing for Gill Terrace LLC.
I'll second the motion.
Discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Noes?
I said aye, I'm sorry.
Oh,
It was
okay,
like-
sorry.
It was a little bit.
Sorry, I didn't hear
It
you.
was just
So-
getting later,
and-
sorry about that.
And you, Doug?
I close.
Oh, okay, okay,
I agree.
okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we're going to open a new hearing for the Mill COA. Go ahead, Jared.
This is application number 502-24-AP. The applicant is the Mill Condo Owners Association. Property owner is the same. The application is to appeal a notice of violation issued on April 16th, 2024. Hearing date is today, June 10th, 2024, 6 p.m. Public postings were at the town clerk's office, town hall bulletin boards, post office on May 15th, and the town website on May 24th, 2024, as well as the Vermont Journal on May 22nd, 2024, and the abutting property owners were notified on May 24th, 2024.
Thanks, Jared. Those who wish to speak to this hearing and this hearing alone, you will have to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the matter now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? I do. Okay.
Good evening, all. My name is Peter Raymond. I'm from Sheehy, Furlong, and Beam here on behalf of the mill. With me, I have Brian Porter, Eric Alden, and I believe Bob Malecki is still on the Zoom over there. So this is an appeal of the April 16th NOV. The mill is here before you asking for the NOV to be withdrawn or to have been deemed cured by subsequent actions. Before I get into the basis of the appeal, just turning to the NOV itself and giving a little background. The NOV, this is the second NOV. There was an earlier NOV in December, which has come before this board, and you're all familiar with that. But the April 16th NOV it's a little unclear on the specific conduct that's alleged to be the violation, but taking a step back, there's kind of two let's say buckets or two projects going on at the mill that were the concern of the December NOV and what we understand to be the concern of this new one. And that's the basement repairs, the basement units of the mill, which is across the street here, and then the rear deck work, the safety repairs. So the basement repairs, that's those were the units that were actually damaged during the flood. So that's the flood remediation work. Whereas the rear decks, the work related to those is separate from the flood repairs, but that was actually a safety concern that's been noted for prior to the flooding last year. And there's a series of emails that were provided to the town earlier today from our office, from largely in January and February of this year that I believe you've all probably already seen, but just to give some of the background there. So if I refer to one of those and you have any questions, just let me know. So that work is relevant and is helpful to understand because once the basements were flooded and once and the rear deck repairs, both of those, as the December NOV acknowledged, required permits. Violations were issued, and subsequently the mill has been working to obtain those permits. Skipping or scrolling ahead to February, there's been discussions of trying to do essentially two things. One is put in place some temporary repairs to the decks themselves because currently they're unsafe, they can't be used. Several of the mill units actually require access or use of the decks for access. And so there's a temporary stabilization plan that was provided by Brian to Jared, I think on February 8th, that calls out work to be done to stabilize those decks. And then there's also repairs to the basement units to allow them to be potentially reoccupied. Ongoing at the same time is work to bring those units to be compliant with the flood hazard regulations. It's kind of two tracks. There's the flood proofing as it's termed under the regs for the basement units, and then the mill is currently working with Kyle Medash for the floodway standards for the deck repairs, and so that's ongoing. There's an H&H study that's going to be needed. Engineers have been retained. But back to in January and February, that was a discussion before the board, and the request at that time was let the temporary repairs to the rear deck, the safety repairs continue, and also let some of the work to the basement units continue so that the potential for them to reopen while the engineering is developed and a plan submitted and permits compliant with the flood hazard regulations are achieved. And it was the mill's understanding that was approved by this board, and I referenced the February 12th, 2024 meeting minutes. So scrolling ahead to the work that was occurring on April 16th, 2024, and I'll defer to Brian later on, or if he has more to add. But so that work after that February 12th, 2024 meeting, there was some repair work to the basement units, largely sheetrock. The mud had been removed. They're essentially down to studs, but some minor work there, and there was some minor work on the decks. What happened was. So that work, with the understanding that work had been approved, the mill was moving forward with that. At the same time, again, they retained Stevens and Associates, and they're moving forward on that front. On or around April 16th, it's not clear the specific day, but on that day, there was there was a little lack of clarity on specifically what could be done in the floodway. What happened was some of the deck supports, the temporary deck plan called for essentially pylons along the edge of the deck, and a number of those had been poured back in December that caused the violation. 2 had been missed, and those are what the temporary supports to the deck are built on. The plan was to move forward with those. Call went out in the morning to confirm that could go forward. The town planning and zoning checked into it. Also, Kyle Medash was contacted by Brian Porter, and the response was received in the afternoon that no, that should not go forward. So immediately the contractors were contacted and work was stopped. It took about an hour or an hour and a half to get them to stop because just the game of phone tag and who was available. But I think a mill representative actually went down. Jake Barwall went down and it was stopped. So no new footings were actually poured. Work was started, but nothing was finished. I think what is there is some boards that could be used to frame in the footings, but there was no new concrete has been poured. So that's kind of the background on the facts of this case. So what the mill is asking is essentially for this to be withdrawn or for it to be deemed cured for essentially 3 reasons. One is that there was operating under the good faith understanding that the work that they were doing was with this board's approval, understanding it wasn't a cure to the December violation. They needed to continue to work to get the engineering done, to get the permits that would allow them to become fully compliant with the flood hazard regs. That work is ongoing. It just takes time. And secondly, that if there was a potential violation, all work was immediately stopped. No work has occurred since then. The result of this is, that the decks are still unsafe for use. The basement units are no closer to being occupied, so those are just vacant now. But there's been no work done. And then the third reason is we'd submit that at this point, knowing the existence of the December NOV, which wasn't appealed, so that's out there. The mill has to comply with it. The town has leveraged, the enforcement capabilities. The mill's working expeditiously, I'd say, to get those additional permits. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of engineering.
Excuse me, can I interrupt? We have suspicion that the recording has stopped. So we need this to all be repeated on the record. So I'm not really sure. Can you verify that we're still recording up there? Still going?
Okay. Recording's still going?
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Nope, I appreciate the technical input there.
You don't want to hear me twice, so.
Okay.
Great. So the third point is just that at this point, due to the lack of the kind of reasonable misunderstanding to the extent there was one, and knowing that there is an existing violation out there, the mill's working to achieve compliance with that, and that this work was done with the intent that it was approved, but also a piece that I failed to mention, but I would like to raise now, is that the temporary work that was done and the current H&H study and the engineering work, that encompasses and that is taking into account this the plans that were proposed for the temporary stabilization. So this is not a case where we're changing the facts on the ground to make it easier to get permits in the future. This is all work that is going to be analyzed, and if it's a little bit on the mill if things need to be redone, they'll have to do that to become to meet the flood hazard standards or whatever they might be. So it would we'd submit that there's just not there's no additional reason for another NOV, and in fact it could hinder further efforts by the mill. Another NOV out there, it just adds another layer of complexity to their transactions, to what they need to do, and considering that the town has the leverage that it does, and the mill's what I'd submit is demonstrating compliance or an attempt to comply and working towards that to be flood compliant, that would not be an additional NOV would not be necessary. And so what I'd like to do now is if the board will permit, I'd like to just ask Brian to if he has any additional facts that you'd like to fill in to the discussions that you had with the town in January and February of this year, or the work how the April 16th day transpired, and learned that the work should cease, and what you did to stop that.
Over the course of the winter, when we have been talking about the temporary deck repairs, Peter mentioned we did send a copy of the plans that the engineer gave us for those temporary repairs, and the detail there. And when I was before the board at the February DRB meeting, and we were given verbal permission to proceed with safety work as well as flood recovery work, while we were working on, we talked about an MOU, we were working on that, while we were working on finding engineers, which we have done, to help us with making the building flood compliant. We've done that. That's Stevens & Associates has been hired for that. We've hired Stevens & Associates to help us evaluate H&H engineering and work with Cal Medash and deal with the technical aspects of that. And then actually in the last week, we've also hired Stevens & Associates as our architects for the reconstruction of all the decks. And that work, we just communicated that to them late last week. So on April 16th, Eric called me at about 10:15 in the morning and said, the guys are working on footers in the floodway. Are you familiar with that? And I said, they must be working on, we must have missed those footers in December. And that was in fact the case, when there were, I believe, 8 footers that were poured between the building and the flood and the river, which resulted in the violation of December 15th. These additional 2 footers that were being worked on in April were on the plans that were submitted in February, were always part of the scope of the work. It has always been our intent to have them evaluated, the footers that are in place and the footers that are not yet in place, as part of our compliance with the flood regulations. But we saw the work, we said, oh, okay, we didn't specifically bring this to Planning and Zoning's attention, let's do so. So I called and spoke to Kyle shortly after, I think at about 10:18. I called Jared and said, Jared, this work is going on, just wanted to make you aware of it. It is part of the plan that we've talked about in the past, but we didn't specifically point to it. And he said, well, I'll get back to you if it's a problem. I said, okay, thank you. Subsequently, we had a sort of an email communication with Kyle Medash going, and this was around 12 or 12:30. Kyle said, hey, I hear there's work being done in the floodway. You can't do that. Please stop. He sent that by email around 12:30. I replied, I saw the email shortly before 2, and I replied and said, okay, we'll get it stopped. And it took us about an hour to get in touch with the contractors. We did so, we confirmed that they stopped, and then I sent Kyle an email saying, we've stopped, I can confirm the work's been stopped. And we haven't done work since. But we just wanted to be clear with the board. We identified this as a possible problem and brought it to planning and zoning's attention. We were working under what we thought was the authority of this board and planning and zoning to proceed with the temporary deck repairs. All of this work's on the plans. And
so in response to, I've got the whole string of emails from Kyle, I thought it was made pretty clear with his previous comments that anything in the floodplain or floodway that you guys would have to do would need those hydrologic studies. And when you step into that world of the state floodway, right, you are now not only in our world, you are also in the state's world of governance.
Yes.
And I mean, I will read the excerpt from Kyle's, one of his emails to put it on the record. But not asking and getting that proper permission, even though it may have been implied is that this was a emergency repair that we were led on to believe had already been done. I understand the potential confusion, and I do appreciate you contacting us and stopping upon request. Just to read, this is a response from Kyle in respect to that. And it was at Kyle's direction that he requested this. Just issue them another violation in the same template as the first. It's essentially the same thing. Calling Jared this morning to notify the town that they have construction equipment in the river is not the protocol and unacceptable. They have an existing unresolved violation for this same work in December of 2023. They are plenty aware of the regs, and I'd imagine this work was planned to occur before this morning. I'd imagine the resolution will occur in the same fashion as the existing violation. They get an H&H study demonstrating no rise. At this point, it's worth documenting for NFIP enforcement purposes. That was his language verbatim. He was not happy. Does that make sense? Is that he'd already curtailed what you had needed to get. And then you went, and I understand the confusion. I'm just saying that this is the information that was brought forth to issue the notice of violation.
But the H&H study and we have spoken, we've gotten quotes, we've spoken to 3 H&H engineers. The work has been more clearly defined as a result of Stevens and Associates talking to Kyle a little over a week ago. And so we're having to rebid that work. But always the work that we have bid is based on the engineering plan that shows all of the footers, including the 2 that have not yet been built. We have never not thought that was going to be included in the H&H work and would be included in, and frankly, we've always thought it was included in the violation of December 15th. In our minds it was, because it was all part of the same plan. And the remedy for all of it includes those 2 unbuilt footers. So we didn't see them as being, truthfully, I didn't recognize that we missed those footers in December. The contractor that was working on it saw it. We asked him to keep working towards completing the work per the plan. He was the one. This is Summit Property Management. They were the ones that said, "Oh shoot, these 2 footers got missed." They didn't tell us they were forming it up and going to do it. They just started doing it. Now I know we're responsible, but it has always been our presumption that all of those footers are need to be solved, whether they're built yet or not.
I think, recollecting back to that meeting, that it was, the way it was presented was that all the work in the floodplain was complete for the temporary repairs at the time.
Well, if that was said, then I may have made a misstatement, because there is still other work that needs to happen and hasn't happened yet.
And any work in the floodway requires permission from Kyle. right? That not, no matter just what we say, but also he has input as well. And looking back at the presentation from what that meeting was, is that we saw as that say, hey, okay, you guys acknowledged you made these emergency repairs and things were not hunky-dory with us and the state. In hindsight, you didn't know, I'll take your word for it, that those had been missed. But I think since that realizing, hey, we should have done this, I do acknowledge you did contact us, which was good. But I think our go ahead of whether or not to continue repairs of adding to the floodway would have been a different verbal answer at the time, had we known you'd had to pour more footings.
And I would have, the reason I called Jared was because we realized that this could be a potential problem for the town and or the state.
I appreciate that.
And if I had known when I was talking to you in February, at the February DRB meeting, that we still had 2 more footers to go, I would have asked you about it. I would have said, can we do those 2 more footers when the cold breaks? We didn't know. It's why we brought it up. But
I appreciate that.
Again, we've always felt that the violations included not just the work in place, but the work that was planned. And it's always been our intention to bring the work that was planned into compliance.
Any comments from the board members?
The H&H studies that we've talked about have absolutely included. We give them a copy of the plans and say, this is what we have to make this compliant.
So where are you at right now? You stopped, you're just on hold.
We're on hold with rear deck temporary repair work. We're on hold with flood recovery work. Flood recovery work in the bar, flood recovery work in the offices. We haven't done anything since we were asked to stop.
And just for clarification of the record, I don't know if you know George, but what are we waiting on? What's the holdup here? What are we waiting on?
So we're waiting on the accompanying whole package. It was requested back then that they enter into a memorandum of understanding with the town, which is not, I will put on the record, is not been signed or agreed to, despite the best efforts of the town's attorney. Is that currently as it sits, they have a group of recessed hearings, and that no new information, to the best of my knowledge, and maybe Jared and Rose can answer better to that, has been provided for those hearings. And since there's no new information, there's no reason to open those hearings. Go ahead and answer away.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I followed the last part. The previous hearings on.
So there's multiple open hearings for the mill building of a various variety, correct? And if no new information is brought forth, why would a recessed hearing being opened? And so there's new information that is being needed for many hearings that are currently recessed for the mill.
Well, there's the 2 applications that I think are the subject of these violations.
So this NOV is almost exclusively, to the best of my knowledge, around work that was conducted to these 2 footings. If is correct, Rose, is that what it was issued for?
Correct. That is
Okay,
correct.
so-
Yep.
And I don't want us to get off in the weeds of disagreements on MOUs between lawyers. That's not why we're here tonight. We're here to talk about this NOV on the 2 footers.
I'm sorry, you made a comment about that there was no progress on the MOU, and we hired Peter to try to make progress on the MOU, and I know he has spent a significant amount of time in trying to make progress on the MOU.
It's been many months and we don't have a signed MOU. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So with that being said, I know there's been multiple drafts sent back and forth, but after about draft 5, I categorize that as not a whole lot of progress has been made.
For the record, if I may.
Go ahead.
Last communication was the town's not interested in an MOU. So I think we're at a point where the mill was.
I think is that from the best of my knowledge with what we were CC'd in emails, we were willing to convey pretty much everything. I will talk to the lawyers again for their input, and again on this NOV as well. But the purpose that this one was brought about was for work that, despite being an unknown, mistaken, and these two piers footings, that's really why we're here tonight, is on these two, right? There is already another notice of violation that covers all the other work, right? This one is really focused on two piers or footings, or however you want to classify them, that may have been a miscommunication on all parties.
Just for the record, there were 2 footers that were being formed. There was a little bit of digging and the forms were in place. The concrete has not been poured. There's no piers on top of them. At this point, they're just 2 holes with a box in that would, you know.
So, and I'd listen to what the board might have as an input, but being that Kyle was the one who really pushed for us to issue this, right? And this is his world. I would like to hear what not that I don't trust you what you're saying, but what he's saying is in his input of what it may change in digging boards, and maybe that this is a nothing experience.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around what Kyle wants. Why don't we have it?
If I may,
Fire away.
From the permitting perspective, in order for him to issue the letter, essentially, you know, for the assessment of whether work in the floodway is not going to have a change on the flood elevation or the flood velocity, that requires a hydraulic study of the work that will be done. So that's what he's waiting on, and it's something that it doesn't take a week or 2 weeks. You know, it's above my pay grade to be able to do that.
I understand it takes a significant amount of time, but clearly defined in his response to this, being that at the time of the previous hearing where we said, yeah, go ahead, make those emergency repairs, it wasn't alluded to the fact of adding more footers and stuff like that. I think at that time, had we been aware of that, we would have contacted Kyle and says, hey, what is your opinion on that? He clearly states that he wants to have some input on these two, even those might be an emergency deemed repair. But we would like to hear his response. I know there might be accompanying more data to that as well. Sorry, go ahead.
So in terms of providing additional information to the board and planning and zoning, one of the challenges we had is we weren't quite sure what H&H work was required. So we hired Stevens and Associates to help us figure out what work to contract. And we had 3 H&H quotes, and they were all different scopes of work. And there were disagreements among the H&H engineers as to what we should do to be compliant with Kyle. So Stevens and Associates met with Kyle last week.
Okay.
For about an hour, and the result of the meeting was a clear scope of work.
Okay.
That we can now, so we have put that clear scope of work back to the 3 H&H engineers.
Okay.
To bid that, and it was a little bit different than all 3 of the bids. And we're waiting to hear from those 3 engineers, and we're ready to hire them to get that work started. And but from a timing standpoint, the earliest availability was to even start the work was like late July, with reports in late August. I think we're looking at August or September before we actually have something we can give to Kyle. And this is for the planned work. This is for the full scope, not just what's in place, but all the work that would be done per the engineer's
For the
plan.
whole project.
For the whole project.
Okay.
Right.
And he was happy, and Kyle helped you navigate to what you would need to provide him for your entire project scope.
There was agreement between Stevens and Associates and Kyle as to exactly what was needed.
For the entirety of the project in regards to the H&H engineering studies.
For the rear deck temporary repair work.
Okay.
Yes. There will be, just to be clear, there probably will be H&H work relative to our flood proofing or flood compliance.
Okay, so this is just on the deck repairs?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And these are for the long-term, just to make sure I'm getting it all correct, that these were for these repairs or for the bigger repairs of the deck? That your last conversation, you said you had a week ago. So the email I'm reading off is from April 16th, the date that the notice of violation was
The conversation that they had last week was for all of the repairs, all of the temporary deck repairs.
Okay, and this was intended as in a temporary deck repair?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're currently trying to get that information to make Kyle happy?
We now know exactly what he needs, and that's been communicated with 3 H&H engineers, and we're waiting to hear back from them on their bids to hire them.
Okay.
And we hope that will be soon.
And what was your expected timeline of dates for information?
Availability, I think the best availability was like late July to start the work, with reports in August or early September. That's what I recall. None of them were available in June.
What's the board think? Rose, Jared, do you guys have comments?
Well, I mean, I think the whole thing, could have been solved a long time ago if they had applied for the permit and gave us the documentations. At that time, we might not had to have done an H&H study, but now that Kyle's on board, he's requiring that. So, we still don't have any type of permit application or any type of documentation that we have asked for in the past. The MOU hasn't been signed at all. And, now they have the second violation.
We have, I know that our attorney and the town's attorney have been going back and forth on the MOU on, I think, a couple of points, but there were milestones in the MOU drafts. Most of the drafts had the same milestones, and we have hit, or almost hit, all of the milestones so far in the draft MOUs. We have hired an engineer to help us flood-proof the building. We have hired an engineer to help us completely redesign all the decks. And we have been reporting to the town on our progress in between DRB meetings. So we have tried, even though the draft isn't signed, we have tried to comply with it anyway, because we think it's, the right thing to do.
Why don't you sign it?
We don't have an MOU to sign at this point. The last communication I had was it's off the table.
And that communication came from?
The town's attorney.
Chris Callahan. So I think that's a worthy inquiry from the board to Chris. In reference to the MOU, this notice of violation, and kind of the whole kit and caboodle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if I may, Mr. Chair, you had a question, and I just wanted to follow up on it to make sure that we gave you the right response. You had asked about what Kyle needs and you wanting to get his input, and I just wanted to clarify, are you looking for his input on, the 2-footers, which, again, the NOV that we have doesn't make that specific, so just wanted to clarify that, this new NOV about those 2-footers, his take on what needs to be done, whether, fill them back in, or if it's a big deal because the work was stopped and not poured, or were you referencing more what does he need for, the H&H?
So let me just get one clarification question first. You wish to conduct these emergency repairs of these 2-footers before the rest of the project goes forth? Or are these needed to secure your deck so that, whatever emergency things you've called?
We're fine with holding on these 2-footers.
Okay.
And all of the work that is outside of the flood wall. So anything that's between the building and the river and the flood wall and the river, we're fine with holding on all of that until we have letters from Kyle stating that he's happy with the plan and remediation and all that. The only thing that we would, I that we would request respectfully is if we could proceed with work that is behind the flood wall, so not in the floodway. We have 4 units whose only access is the rear deck. So they haven't been able to get in their units for 2 months. And we were, at the time of the stoppage, very close to completing the work on that section. It's just the 4 units that are the second story only on the far eastern end of the building. If we could complete that work, then those unit owners could have access. None of that work is in the floodway. It's all behind the flood wall. I mean, that would be super helpful. But we're, frankly, I mean, if you said take the forms out and fill the holes back up, we would do that. Like it would take us, 3 hours, 3 guys, 3 hours, and you'd never know we were there, and we would be fine with that.
Unfortunately, that's Kyle's job, right? Is he covers that jurisdiction.
I'm just saying we were violated by if it would help the violations to fill those holes back in and never touch them until all of this is resolved.
And that was part of my question too, and back to your question was, obviously he was not happy with what happened, right? And so you've been in contact with Kyle since. Yes. And the board is very curious to hear, since our last string of emails here is on April 16th, where he says, stop the work, issue a notice of violation, right? That what information does he need to be happy to either let you do it or not let you do this small repair? Because that's what pertains to this violation, right? So in the scope of this notice of violation, we're only talking about these 2 footings that you wanted to build, right? If you're okay with saying, hey, we're not going to use these, we're going to wait till the big plan, and Kyle's okay with if anything needs to be removed or filled in, I think the board would like to hear that because. Sorry, go ahead, Rose.
Oh, I just wanted to say that with the 2 notices of violation on the property as a homeowners or condo owners association, that puts everything in violation. And I don't agree with being able to do any construction on the building. And also, there's still not a permit. I mean, if they want to file for a permit to finish those decking around the condos, then that's a start. But the MOU was never signed because neither party could come to an agreement. That's exactly what happened. At that point, it's a waste of time to continue sending MOUs back and forth with crosses out on them to make people happy. And this is the same thing, why let any construction go on in a building that has 2 NOVs, no permit, and no MOU. Thank you.
With that comment, what's the board think? I think we're going to have to talk to Chris Callahan, town's attorney, on this. I know that's not the answer you want, but based by the input of the zoning director and feels like the purview of the board, that would probably be our best going forth of how to handle it.
Would the board be open to keep the hearing open for 2 weeks so we could see if Kyle would provide his input on this?
I think it would be, it would work well for the board to recess this till the next month, but no motion has been made at this time. And if the board thinks that communication within a time frame would be good, I mean, I'm open to suggestions. What do you think?
I'd make a motion to recess this next month and hopefully get some input from Kyle. This might be resolved.
I'll second that.
Have time to talk to Chris.
This might just be so we have a motion and a second. So under discussion, just to add the comment that some good communication between everybody might make everyone happy and make disagreements go away. But any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor to recess this hearing till next month? Board members, Zoom, Rose, Jared?
No, thank you.
All, sorry, go ahead. Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
No, I
Opposed?
would like to say something.
Sorry, ma'am, it's already been recessed, sorry.
You
And
have
there
to be
was
kidding
multiple
me.
attempts made.
You made 2 attempts. I'm on the Zoom call.
There was no hand.
There was no hand, it was called multiple times, ma'am. The hearing has been recessed till next month.
You guys are
Thank you very much.
unbelievable.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, one more. We're going to open a new public hearing for Patrick Williams.
This application is number 503-24-VA. The applicant is Patrick Williams. Property owner is the same. The application is to construct a small deck to support a hot tub, partially outside of setback regulations. The project is located in the Village Residential Commercial District. Hearing date is June 10th, 2024, 6 p.m. Public postings are at Town Clerk's Office, Town Hall Bulletin Boards, and Post Office on May 15th, and the town website on May 24th, as well as the Vermont Journal on May 22nd. And the abutting property owners were notified on May 24th, 2024.
Thank you, Jared. For those who wish to speak to this hearing and only this hearing, you do have to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the matters now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? I do. Okay. How about you tell us about what you want to do?
So what happened is
State your name
I'm
first.
sorry. My
Thank
name's
you.
Patrick Williams, 2 Robart. We wanted to we just bought this house last year, after the storm, after the flood. And we wanted to put a deck and a jacuzzi at the house. And what happened is we had a bunch of contractors come by and look at give us estimates and so forth. And actually, most of them were really too busy to do any work. But they all kind of said the same thing, is that the jacuzzi would have to be put in the back of the house. Because what happens is we have 2 structures. We have the house, and then we have a fairly big garage. And I was unaware of this because we're new to Vermont. We've rented for the last 3 years prior to buying the house. But, and they all said the same thing, that the snowfall from the roof, God forbid anybody's in the jacuzzi, and also, the slide of the pitch of the roof, and also would damage the jacuzzi, would not only damage the jacuzzi, could hurt somebody and so forth. And I was unaware of that. So they all kind of said is to put the jacuzzi in the back of the house. We were unaware that there's a 15-foot, you can't build anything within 15 foot of your property line. So we contacted my neighbor, or the people that live behind us, is the railroad. The house is just right over here. And so we contacted the railroad, and we asked them for permission if we could get like I guess a variance would be the right term, to build closer. We would be instead of being 15 feet, we'd be 9.5 feet from the property line. And the state, the railroad company said, yeah, we have no problem with you building whatever you want on your property, but we don't really own the property, the state does. So then we contacted the state, and the state said, he came out, and very, very nice folks, and they came out and they measured and whatever, and they said, yeah, we don't have a problem with you building your deck on your property. So I have a letter from the state, we have a letter from the railroad, and we also have two separate contractors stating that the only really practicable place to put the jacuzzi would be in the back of the house. We also have a letter from, we purchased the jacuzzi from Night Tubs down the street a little bit, and they also came out and looked at the property, and there's a letter from them stating basically the same thing, that Really, the only other place you could put the jacuzzi would be the front of the house. And the front of the house is owned by Okemo Mountain. And it's kind of like I guess it's an old inn that they kind of turned into a transitional apartment kind of slash house. So there's like lots of transitional folks coming in, going. It's actually a parking lot. And then my front of my house is actually a parking lot, and then their building. And it's a pretty big house. And, you know, I think to put the jacuzzi in front of the house would be kind of tacky, first of all, say the least. And also I have my young daughters and so forth in front of the house we don't think that would be a good idea. So, and then I also there's a letter there from my neighbor. I'm 2 Wilbart, and the closest person to me would be 1 Wilbart. And they wrote a letter to the board stating that they don't have any objections to us, putting the deck in the back of the house. And there's really nobody could see. It's not like there's nobody really could see the deck. I mean, we're at the end of a dead end. And I also took pictures of the snow from this year. Like this, I was kind of saying like how much snow actually does come down, and it's an awful lot of snow. That from the pictures of the roof, and then you would have to basically change from the contractors' things. They said you would have to actually change the pictures of the roof. We would think about putting like a pergola thing, but they still said it would damage the jacuzzi. And there's a letter from the owner of Night Tub saying the same thing. So I'm just asking if you could, for a variance, and that's up to you folks.
So, when you applied for the variance, were you made aware of the 5 criteria that are required by law in order for a variance to be issued?
Yeah,
Okay.
There's a list of 5.
So in that, you need to meet all the criteria. And so I think the best way, unless the board has questions beforehand, how about you go through to why those criteria you think you would go against the zoning rules for, right? Because zoning and variances are the exact opposite. So you're asking, so the zoning says that with this is a setback, right?
Mm-hmm.
A variance is the exact opposite of zoning. Why should we break the rules for you? And those are the 5 criteria have been outlined by the state of Vermont. So number 1 is unique features. So why do you think your property has such a unique feature that we should go against the traditional zoning?
Well, there's really no other place that you could put the jacuzzi other than, because the back of the house it says it in the plans, is only X amount of feet from the back of the house to the property line. I can tell you how many it is. So
When you bought this property, were you aware of where the property line was, sir?
sure, I guess so.
Okay.
So it's 4 and 7,
So under number 2, there's no possible way to develop. So there's no other place that that you can potentially develop what you're trying to do.
No.
Number 3 is existing hardship. So what's your existing hardship with this project? That is category number 3.
What do you mean by existing?
That is, by the terms of the state, it's categorized as existing hardship. You not having a hot tub, how is that an existing hardship, sir?
Well, we wanted to put a hot tub in the house. I mean, so, yeah, we just want to put a hot tub in the house.
So,
I mean, that's not a.
So the way the state approaches variances.
What's that?
The way the state approaches variances is the same 5 criteria, no matter how big or small the project is. And category 3 really aims at hardship. That whatever the project that you need to do that goes and breaks the traditional zoning, is causing you a hardship in why you would need to do this. And so that's why I'm asking you, what hardship are you currently exhibiting that where you would need this deck and hot tub?
There's no other place I could put it. There's no other place that you could put the jacuzzi.
Go ahead,
I'm
Phil.
just
You
gonna
can,
jump in.
yeah.
So the request for the variance is a deck and a hot tub, correct?
Yes, sir.
So why couldn't you put the hot tub on the side of the house between the garage and the house with a little hip roof over it? So the snow load went left and right, your hot tub doesn't even get a snow.
The contractor said you'd have to change the pitch of the roofs. That's
No,
what
you
they,
don't have to, I'm not saying that. Right under your eave, put a little hip roof on it, on the wall,
and then, but then the snow would go, where would the snow go?
left and right, but your hot tub's sitting there without any snow load on it.
But then I think it would go to, right, against that, I don't know, this is what my contractors told me. A bunch of them told me.
Well, I'm just saying, George is on the criteria. The criteria says no possible way that you can't do anything else. And when we did a site visit today, that was the first thing that hit me is you can put it right here and put a little hip roof on it and it's a done deal. Your hot tub's under the roof.
The
You don't have
contractors,
to touch your main roof at all, put it, you can attach it to right under your eave.
You could also put, I mean, and this is where the variance criteria is very strict. That's set forth to us. It could be looked at as, hey, I could put my hot tub out on that portion of land that is on the other side of your barn, right? Where there's kind of that green space there. You could put your hot tub there versus behind your house, right? So this is where like the criteria said there's no other way, right? And this is why variances are very difficult to obtain, is you must meet all the criteria and categorize. The reason I asked you to start through these is because on category 3 of existing hardship, you wrote the answer is no. And so that's why, and the way the variance regulations work is that if you don't meet all criteria, that's an automatic disqualification. You need to meet all 5 to get a variance. So that's why I was curious if your opinion has changed since that letter has been written.
no.
Okay. Does the board have any other questions? Okay. Jared, Rose?
Thinking about the hardship, and I don't know if the property owner was aware of it when we talked to him, but it was my understanding that they had like, I don't know, a reason for the hot tub for, arthritis or something, or bad back, or something like that. So I don't remember that being included in the documents. And I just want to put that out there because maybe it can give the homeowner a second chance to write up his documents so that we could, maybe have a better look at it and talk to him about it. Maybe you can recess it.
What do you think, sir? We'll put that in your court.
Sure.
Do you want to take the opportunity to maybe readdress on how to meet those 5 criteria?
Okay,
Planning and zoning can work with you, try the best they can to see how you can meet those criteria.
okay,
Does that sound okay with you?
okay.
I make a motion that we recess Patrick Williams' hearing until next month. Discussion. Does the board have any other comments, questions?
The only comment I want to make is that I realize this has been a long meeting. I know you've been sitting here all night, and as were we, and I don't want us to come across as if we're being short with you at all. We want to give you all the opportunities to help you to make this project a success. But just as George was saying, that these five criteria, we don't have any wiggle room with them. It's I don't know how else to say it, but it's all or nothing. And so we're trying to do our best for you, but we also need you to realize that these 5 criteria need to be met for us to be able to allow this variance. And we don't have any other way to do this. So that's just that. So I want to make it clear that we're while we've been here for a while, I want you to feel as if we're giving you as much time.
Yeah, I just thought that since, none of the neighbors or nobody really had an issue or problem with it,
Sure.
that it would be a, and again, I was unaware when we purchased the house and we were trying to put the jacuzzi in, that there was a problem with snow. And I had spoke to my contractors about, again, it's putting that some type of pergola, some type of thing over it. And they all basically said no. So
And thanks, John, for bringing that up. And I do appreciate your patience here. It probably one of the longest DRB meetings in recent time. And you know, the state has dictated how variances are issued because in their nature, you're going against the will of what the people have said that they want their zoning to be. And so the state has set those restrictions inherently tight, right? Is that, you know, this project, in its scope, it might be relatively small too, comparative to a large variance, right? But the same rules apply to no matter what the project is. And those 5 criteria are set forth for us to use. And as just to piggyback again off what John said is, we don't have any other avenue for that, right? That's the criteria we are handed here as the board to judge you by. And so I do appreciate you taking the opportunity to try to work with planning and zoning to get those criteria to work more in your favor. But we do have a motion on the floor, and any further discussion? Anything from Zoom? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Question is?
No.
Okay.
I know.
Okay, so we will, we'll postpone minutes until next month.
Yeah, we'll do that. I think we did,
If
did we
everyone's,
do, I think we did April 8th twice, or did I just miss out?
Copies of it.
Yeah, that's just
Oh,
a,
okay.
we did April, that was.
and,
Excuse me,
oh, Rose, sorry, go ahead.
there, on the website, there's 2 April 8th minutes, and one, it says amended. So I don't know if you guys looked at those or why it was amended.
Mine doesn't say amended on it.
I thought
No,
we,
on the website, Julie.
I thought we did April. Yeah, because I
I remember doing it, I remember correcting, but we
Yeah.
just need to change health auditorium to healed. We're getting the wrong
oh, yeah,
place.
yeah, yeah. So that's on which one?
No, I mean, just in general,
Oh.
just
oh,
general information, it should be healed
Oh, okay.
auditorium.
I think in sense of time, we can,
Wait for next.
we'll wait till next, we'll hit this on the ground running next time.
I like it.
Any other business?
In the meantime, look at the minutes on the web and you'll see that there's 2 sets of minutes that have amendments to them. And I don't know what they're for.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second, any discussion in favor?
Aye.
Aye.